It's not these people's fault, those people's fault. That's what it is.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ascension Parish Home Rule Charter Revision Committee meeting. We'll start the meeting with the prayer, and we're going to ask our committee member, Reverend Michael Burnett, to lead us in prayer.
Well, Heavenly Father, we thank you tonight, Lord God, for this gathering of the minds, Lord God. We pray that your spirit be filled this tonight, Lord God. We pray, Lord God, that we come together, Lord God, and have a productive meeting, Father God. We thank you for the things that are going to happen within this parish, within this meeting, and all these things we ask in your darling son Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. We're going to ask that committee member, Councilman Bill Dawson, lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, we'll ask the secretary to please conduct the roll call.
Bill Dawson.
Present.
Mr. Burnett.
Present.
Mr. P.T.
Here.
Mr. Trosclair.
Present.
Mr. Jarrow. Mr. Kazare.
Here,
Ms. Casso.
she's en route. She's stuck in traffic coming out of Baton Rouge.
Mr. Lawler.
Present.
Mr. Martinez. Ms. Laurent.
Present.
Mr. Hernandez.
Present.
Mr. Lambert.
Present.
Okay, we have 9 members present, which constitutes a quorum. Okay, we're going to ask the public, those that would like to give their testimony, individuals, and before we have you all to sign in, we need to discuss this, at least ratify this suggestion or recommendation or discuss it, that individuals willing to speak, the general public, that this committee would afford them a time frame of 3 minutes. And those organizations represented by an appointed individual, then the organization can be allotted 10 minutes. Elected officials, 10 minutes, if they so choose to come and participate. Now, at this point, we're open for discussion to see how you all would like to see it flow. But that's just time frames that's recommended. 3 minutes, individuals. If there's an individual or an organization that's present, then that organization would get 10 minutes. However, we would ask that before the meeting starts to at least give notice to our secretary or me, or the vice chair, of your designation as the speaker or the appointed individual for any particular organization.
I would object to that, Chairman Cuiser.
Okay?
I mean, is this the Citizens Charter? We hear this talk about the Citizens Charter. If this is indeed the Citizens Charter, any citizen who chooses to should be allotted the same time to me, okay? Organizations, okay, I think we're talking, let's cut to the chase here. The organization we're talking about is a Better Ascension. And they've been afforded plenty of opportunity to make their case, okay? There's a committee of the whole that was never disbanded whose specific task was to vet a Better Ascension's proposal, okay? They had their crack. Now, and a Better Ascension wants to keep talking about this is the Citizens Charter. Any citizen of this parish, I welcome their input, okay? That's my objection.
Okay.
I would further object to that as well. I don't have a problem with any citizens having afforded the same amount of time as any politician, but at some point in time, this committee is here to vet the proposal by both RPEC and a Better Ascension. And at some point in time, we need to bring in some experts, attorneys on the legalities of this, et cetera. They're going to need more than 3 minutes or 10 minutes.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, sir.
That kind of ties into what I was thinking. I know we had discussed having expert testimony in this. I think expert testimony should be given a longer allotted time, say 10 minutes. As far as organizations go, I'm okay with organizations, whether it be RPEC, ABA, Ascension Citizens Group, getting 10 minutes. I don't see any reason that an elected official should get 10 minutes, simply individuals also. I think every elected official should get their 3 minutes as an individual citizen.
Okay, those were only suggestions to be thrown on the floor to get the discussion or the conversation started. So thank you for your input. Any further commentary? Yes, Dawson.
Chairman, I'd just like to get a clarification. So we're talking about each agenda item. So, I mean, normally that in the public meetings law, the public comment is on every agenda item. So you have 3 minutes, no matter if you want to speak on every agenda item, you have 3 minutes on every one of those.
If that's the pleasure of the committee and it's majority vote of the committee, then so be it.
So
This is a
I
perfect
think
time
we
to
have
discuss
to just be careful of the open meetings law, that we have to allow public comment on every agenda item. Now, it doesn't say how much you can limit them to, but it does say that they can be limited. So
Okay.
I know that we do have to allow this on every agenda item. And, I tend to agree with everybody else, which is, 3 minutes unless they come in here on an expert basis.
Okay, so organization and citizens and elected officials only get 3 minutes.
3
Is
minutes
that-
on each agenda item.
Is that the consensus of the majority of?
I mean, I'll make a
Committee
motion to that
members?
effect if that helps.
And you said with the exception of experts?
Correct.
Okay. All right, the motion, would you state your motion again, PT?
My motion is to adopt Chairman Mr. Dawson's recommendation that organizations, elected officials, private citizens are all treated the same. They get their 3 minutes on any agenda item that appears on the agenda that they like, that they sign up for. Experts will get, are we saying 10 minutes or, okay. And the experts who are offering expert testimony will be afforded 10 minutes.
I would object to the 10-minute portion. If we're going to bring in an expert from wherever outside the state, wherever, they need more than 10 minutes. Not only that, this committee needs more than 10 minutes as well to be well informed on the subject matter as well. So I'm fine with the first part of your proposal, Wade. The second part needs to be more than 10 minutes.
Do you have a suggestion as far as time goes?
I don't see why we can't give them at least 30 minutes to come in here and do a question and answer with this committee on the ins and outs of RPEC's proposal or the county manager, parish manager form of government. This is, you're looking at, like you said earlier, apples and oranges. This committee is here to learn about the subject. That's what we need to do.
Okay.
I do have a question. I think, I don't have a problem with the 30 minutes, but I think a question and answer session is different from a speaking engagement. I think the question and answer can go on for as long as need be, as long as we're asking the questions to that speaker.
Right.
Agreed.
But the presentation from the speaker of that organization would go on for,
Well, I think my motion was 3 minutes.
I object, and I would make a substitute motion to do
Okay.
it 30 minutes for an expert to come in, followed by a question and answer from the committee.
okay, as we have it now before us, we have a motion by PT and a substitute motion of objection. The substitute motion will be voted on first, and then we'll revert back to the original motion.
Can we get some clarification on the substitute motion in a second, maybe?
We need a second.
Yeah, I'll give it a second.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that would be 3 minutes for the individual, an organization, and an elected official, with 30 minutes allotted. They don't have to take all 30 minutes, please don't, for any expert that comes in, and to be followed up by a question and answer session of unlimited duration. And I believe that, I'll leave it at that.
I got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Who is going to determine, who's going to certify what individual is an expert? I mean, I see some flaws in that. I mean, the legal mind here, what is it, the pre-ur test for certifying an expert witness in court? I mean, is it we're going to have credentials like for a parish manager? I'm just having difficulty understanding how this is going to work. Anybody can come before this committee and present themselves as an expert. Are they going to be accepted as so? And if not, who's going to do the accepting or the denial? That's the question I have.
And if in fact an expert does come before us, then we should have some sort of proof of credentials or something to confirm or verify or use as a barometer to say, okay, yeah, this is a bona fide expert in this particular or on this particular subject matter. So, I mean, we can go deep into the woods. I
don't think it's going deep into the woods, Chairman. I think it's just setting a procedure that we all know what the rules of this committee are. I mean, anybody in this audience can come and present themselves as an expert on whatever. Jeff Pettit, for instance, okay, an expert on what? What's his CV? What's his credentials? Mm-hmm. What requirements or standards are we going to apply to certify somebody as an expert?
Mr. Chairman, would it be out of the ordinary for us to ask for that before they even come to the committee? As far as their qualifications, experience?
Well, first and foremost, how do we know what experts will be coming?
RPEC can send a notice to what they would like to send up, and the same thing with a Better Ascension. If they want to send Joe Blow, Joe submit that nomination to the committee, and we can decide if they truly are an expert or not. Same thing.
Okay.
I mean, that's not an expert, that's a lobbyist.
And please keep in mind, the living document is the existing parish charter, for which our assignment is to review, suggest, and or recommend any changes. But again, we need to bring clarity to the table as to what our job is, what our mission is, and the mission is to examine this living charter, this living instrument. That's the barometer. Anything outside of that is secondary. That we could adhere to listening to a presentation or entertain, or also listening to testimony. But the living document is the charter. So let's keep that in mind as we're setting our parameters today. Mr. Dawson and Mr. P.T.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, if we go back to, the way we do it in the council or in the committees, it's the agenda that establishes who's going to be the, not necessarily expert, but who's going to provide the testimony to support that agenda item. So I would say that's up to the chairman. When the chairman, when he puts the agenda together and someone is named by an agenda item, then normally that person is not subject to the same restrictions as somebody that's up talking, strictly on an agenda item from the public. So it falls into the hand of the chairman when the chairman establishes the committee. Establishes the agenda.
Okay.
I would suggest we probably don't want to get too bogged down in clarity, because we're already ignoring the charter, this living document that gives you the methodology and the procedure to amend the charter. We've already deviated from that because there's two ways to do that. And one is by procedure by petition. That has not ever been discussed. So I don't know, why are we going to look for some procedures to adhere to now? So let's just have a free-for-all.
Well, let's bring it back to dead center. We had another comment.
Yeah, I was just going to try
Yes,
and
sir.
bring it back to reasonableness here. As far as experts go, I think what we can consider is having a 1-week notification of any expert that intends to speak before us, that the entire committee be provided a CV at least 1 week before. And, we're not a court of law, but we can ask questions, and I'd say limit the amount of questions that each member on this committee gets, say to 2 questions to ask that person about their credentials and what they're an expert in. And I think at that point, if we are in agreement, we can even take a vote. Do we consider this person an expert? Because this is an expert not in basis of law, but we're looking for somebody that can help us better understand the issues in front of us.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, so there's no, do we need criteria on expert? Why even have an expert if you're going to let anybody who presents themselves and to help us better understand this document, I think I understand this document fine. Okay, I think anybody who has a mastery of the English language understands this document fine. And are we here to do the people's business like I've heard, heard it propagandized by certain people in this parish? If that's the case, I think every citizen who has mastered the English language can understand this document fine. So I don't know why we even need experts. If we have questions, this committee resolves that we have questions that we are incapable of answering to our own satisfaction, I think maybe it's better that we, at that point, maybe we seek and solicit the expertise of somebody with certain credentials and educational qualifications to, once we decide what exactly we need expertise on. Okay, so nobody's made a motion on this yet, but I'm ready to object to it.
No, there is a substitute motion that's before us. You have the
Not on the
original
issue of the
motion.
expert.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Quasar,
Yes.
would it be reasonable for you and Mr. Dawson to determine if we could accept someone as a expert in this field? You being the committee chairman and Mr. Dawson being the president of the parish council? Is that reasonable?
I'd rather use Ms. Casso since she has she's the vice chair.
Ms. Casso is the vice
Ms.
chair.
Casso, that would. I'm just saying, Mr. Dawson, since he is the, an elected position by the council.
Okay. It's amenable to me. I would hope that Ms.
Yeah, that's
Casso
good.
would
That's
be
fine.
okay with it. I don't
That's
have a
fine.
problem with it.
That's fine.
Personally.
I think that I seem to be the grand objector here, so I think I would be more amenable to that with, I would like for the committee to have opportunity to vote on a recommendation made by Ms. Casso.
Okay.
I would suggest that if somebody objects to somebody speaking as an expert, they object, we can vote on it at that time.
Then we'll vet it at that particular time. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
All right. Okay, let's go back to
That's good.
to where we need to be. There is an original motion by Mr. PT, and there is a substitute motion. If the substitute motion is still on the floor, if it's not withdrawn, then we have to vote on the substitute motion first. Now, does anybody need clarity on the substitute motion? Does
I
it
would
need
like
to
the
be
court reporter
restated?
to read the substitute motion, please.
Definitely.
I just have 30 minutes for the groups, and followed by a question and answer that was made by Brandon Trosclair.
Maybe we can get,
The substitute motion is 3 minutes for each group, politician, or public comment period, with 30 minutes for any experts brought in.
Expert, okay.
Okay, so that's the issue that we're voting on now. We're discussing and we'll vote on this.
I'm not the Roberts Rules guy here, but I think we would need a second, and also.
I would second
Yes,
that motion.
It has to be second, and then we'll have another question from Mr. Dawson. And then if there are no further questions, we'll vote on the substitute motion first.
With the caveat.
So I'd layer another, let me layer another substitute motion on that and try to make that, equivalent to what we talked about, what we agreed to, which, somebody helped me with putting that together, but what we said is that there would be a recommendation, or that the chair and the vice chair would provide something on the agenda as an expert. If that person came in the meeting, somewhat objected to the designation as an expert, then, then he would be removed as the expert. He or she would be removed. Is
Well, the
that
vote would take place.
a vote would take
Right.
place, and
Majority vote.
if he didn't pass that vote as being an expert, then he wouldn't qualify for the 30 minutes. Now, if he, is that correct, Mr. Lambert? I think you.
Yes, sir.
Second.
Okay.
Okay, so the substitute motion has been moved and second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll take a roll call vote. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Dawson,
Yes.
Mr. Burnett,
Yes.
Mr. PT,
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair,
Yes.
Mr. Kazare,
Yes.
Mr. Lawler,
Yes.
Ms. Laurent,
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez,
Yes.
Mr. Lambert.
Yes.
Okay, we have unanimous. That motion passed. Now we'll go back to Mr. PT's original motion.
I'd withdraw it if I need to, but that's,
Okay, for the record, Mr. PT has withdrawn, is withdrawing his motion. Okay, Congress, we just got through that. No. Okay, now, just a few comments. Our meeting schedule is every Monday for the next, I think, 10 weeks. Forecasted every Monday to start at 5 p.m. with a shorter meeting on the nights of the East Ascension Drainage Committee meetings, because you know they will start at 6 p.m. So on that particular Monday, we'd have to come in and handle our business hopefully within an hour. And then we'll have to yield to the East Ascension Drainage Committee meeting, which starts at 6 o'clock. Now, second item I would like to discuss with you all, or just place on the table for discussion.
Mr. Quezzo,
Yes.
is that over here, Roy? Are some of these people on that committee?
The Drainage Committee?
Yes, sir.
I don't know any one of our council persons. All three, yes, because they're from East Ascension. They're members of that particular committee, so they would have to attend
Okay, that's
that
fine.
meeting.
For clarification, last meeting we said we were going to not meet next Monday the 2nd due to the Easter holiday.
Easter holiday,
I just want to make sure we're clear on that. We are going to skip next week?
As I appreciate it, am I correct, Senator?
Yes.
Okay, next Monday, we will not have a meeting the following Monday. Let's get the correct dates into the record. Next Monday would be what? Anybody has a?
The 2nd, April 2nd.
April 2nd, we will not meet.
Okay.
The following Monday is April
9th.
9th. So our next meeting will be April 9th. Okay, now, there was some talk about the formulations, last committee meeting, the formulation of subcommittees. Let's vet that for a few minutes. The committee of the whole is actually the voice. Does the membership think that forming subcommittees, which are additional meetings, would that not be too time constraining? We know everybody has busy schedules and obligations, but it's something that we need to discuss. If this committee wants to go with subcommittees, as we deem appropriate to create or to institute, or would we prefer conducting all of the business of the committee as the committee of the whole?
suggestion?
Yes, Mr. PT.
Maybe we can, if we find ourselves in the weeds too much on any particular thing, maybe at that point we can address whether or not a subcommittee is necessary. As opposed to saying, you know, we want to convene subcommittees and we're not sure what we're going to task any given subcommittee to do.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, we can assume that is the consensus of the committee to formulate or to form subcommittees as we see fit. Is that okay? All right. Since it is a consensus, I don't think we need to take a vote on that one. Now, the third item I'd like to discuss is, again, the call for presentations. But I think the motion that we just passed has really adjusted. But now, is it the mindset of the will of the committee that we request, for example, of that professional organization, a letter from that organization to the committee that you are that he or she is the one appointed designee or representative coming from that particular organization. Is that necessary? Or you all would like to just, again, go, as we said, giving everybody 3 minutes and then experts, hopefully within a 30-minute time frame with questions and answers?
I think you should only have, I hate to use the word spokesperson, but you may have agendas, items on the agenda that a lot of people want to talk about. We don't want, I would not like to have one person or 6 people talking about the same organization. So that's just my idea, is that we have one person representing different an organization. We hear from that one person, and that would give the people time to talk.
Okay.
I would agree with that. Each group has one designated spokesman. Of course, we can bring as many experts as possible, as many public comments as possible, but, as far as RPEC, a better Ascension and better, one spokesperson per group is fine.
Please talk into the mic.
I'm fine with that, with one group getting, one spokesman is fine with me.
Any other comments or questions? If not,
Well,
go, PT?
I think we decided, didn't we? I mean, we voted on a substitute motion where groups were only being given the same 3 minutes as any individual citizen. That's that
Right.
correct? That's what we voted on. Okay, so I don't want to limit. I've got a list of members of certain groups on the interweb. Okay, and I don't want anybody to be limited in their ability just because they happen to belong to a group who has been. Just clarification. We don't want to shut anybody out here. Everybody's opinion needs to be heard here. So if we're designating somebody for a group, that's not going to limit anybody else's ability to speak, correct?
No.
They can always come up as a just
Individual.
Thank
Right,
you.
right. But if you are the president of an association or the chairperson of a group or a designated spokesperson, then we would give credence to that. Okay? Yes, sir.
Might I add, though, if somebody states that I am the president of this organization, we're going to presume you're speaking for that organization and yourself individually. You're not going to get an extra 3 minutes to come back up and speak again as an individual.
Right. I think we'll have enough eyes and ears to pick that up and cut that off. And we're charged with that responsibility. Okay. All right. Well, it's clear. Now, also, by way of resolution, the Ascension Parish Council established this revision committee, and I would like to just read that into the record, and there's an attachment to it. The resolution, United States of America, State of Louisiana, Parish of Ascension, resolution, purpose, to establish a Home Rule Charter Revision Committee, whereas Ascension Parish adopted a Home Rule Charter in 1993, and whereas the Ascension Parish Council, Administration, and citizens of Ascension Parish agree that amendment of the charter would be in the best interest of the parish, and whereas the 1993 charter has served the parish well, however, the Ascension Parish Council and Administration both agree that the most efficient method to revise the charter would be by the creation of a committee and to propose amendments to the charter as provided by Section 9.01 of the Ascension Parish Home Rule Charter. Therefore, be it resolved that the Ascension Parish Council hereby creates a Charter Revision Committee, underscored, not a Home Rule Charter Commission. There's a distinction between the two, to review and make recommendations to the Parish Council to revise the Ascension Parish Home Rule Charter to more efficiently serve the needs of the citizens of Ascension Parish. Therefore, be it resolved that the committee shall be in accordance with Exhibit A attached hereto. And it is certified. The attachment, excuse me, reads as follows. Exhibit A, resolution to establish the Home Rule Charter Revision Committee. Line item 1, for investigation of changes to existing charter. Line item 2, committee shall use the following as sources of investigation, but may not be exclusive list as follows. 1, public input from Committee of the Whole meetings and the Strategic Planning Committee meetings in 2017. 2, Charter Review Task Force report of January 2nd, 2003. 3, Home Rule Charter Commission report dated November 5th, 2009. Next bullet point, a line item. The committee may also contract experts to report to committee with the cost to be paid from the general fund of Ascension Parish. Let me repeat that. The committee may also contract experts to report to committee with the cost to be paid from the general fund of Ascension Parish. Next line item. The committee shall prepare a budget for all forecasted costs of this investigation and submit to the council for approval. Amendments to this budget shall also be submitted to the council for approval. Next line item. The council, through its secretary, shall perform the administrative duties of the committee. Next line item. The chair of the council shall be the temporary chair of the committee and shall call the first meeting to be held March 15th, 2018, where a permanent chair and vice chair are to be elected, for which we've done. The committee shall adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. Next line item. The Charter Revision Committee shall be made up of 12 Ascension Parish citizens, with each council member and the parish president appointing one member to the committee. Any council member and or parish president may appoint themselves as their representatives to the Charter Revision Committee. As we duly note, we do have 3 parish council persons with us. Next line item. Appointments shall be made and submitted to the parish secretary by February 28, 2018. Last line item. The Charter Revision Committee shall report its findings and recommendations to the parish council by May 31st, 2018, which is our designated report day, to have our business as this charter committee completed, May 31st. And there's nothing that would prohibit us from concluding our business before that particular date, but we can't go beyond May 31st. So I wanted to make sure to just read this for further clarity, that each member would know what the charge is for this particular committee. Any questions or further discussion on the resolution or its attachment? Mr. Dawson.
I'd just like to request that Ms. McKee email that out to the members. We should have done that to start with.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Please let it reflect that each member will receive a copy of the resolution coming from the parish council, as well as the attachment A. Okay. That being said, we now will move to the, we've had the chairman's comments, the public comment sign in, and individuals, again, if you're willing, if you would like to speak this evening, just fill out your card and get it to our secretary, and we will recognize you as the process goes. Okay, item number 5 on the agenda is we had assigned Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3 for tonight's agenda. So we would like to, and hopefully each one of you all brought your charter, the charter with you. Thank you. Okay. All right. Article 1 is a very short article. It's Article 1 entitled Form of Government. Section 1-01, Establishment of Home Rule. Ascension Parish is a local governmental subdivision as defined by Article 6, Section 44 of the Louisiana Constitution of 1974. The parish shall be governed under this Home Rule Charter on the authority of Article 6, Section 5 of the Constitution. That being read, is there any comments or discussion regarding Article 1 of the Charter? Mr. Dawson.
not necessarily related to Article 1, Mr. Chair, but I would like to talk about the procedure here for revisions. So we talked about this maybe a little bit earlier, which is, you know, are we going to keep an accumulation, or are we going to revise these as we go along? You know, what, as I think I was telling a few people earlier, in the 2008 commission, we accumulated those. They went to a vote. Any of them that got a majority, they were put on a list to be considered as a whole at the end. So I'm not sure, but, you know, and I'm not making a recommendation. I'm just saying that I think before we start the process, we need to find out, are we going to do, you know, we're going to vote on the revisions as they come up, and then what's the fate of those if they're approved.
Okay, good point. It'd be the will of this committee as to how we want to navigate. We can choose to go article by article, discuss them, and also get public comment or expert comment, and then, as a whole, vote that article or that particular section up or down, or amend it as necessary. Or we can have a running list of amendments, as Mr. Dawson has said. We can have a running list of amendments for from Article 1 throughout the entire charter, and then come back and do a holistic amend, delete, accept, whatever. We can move on all of those amendments or changes per se as we go down the list. So that's the discussion that we need to open up and get your opinions on. Either way, we can do it. We can do it article by article, or entire charter, put a list of changes or amendments or deletions that we may want to filter and cast a decisive vote on it at a later date, later in the process. So, any comments besides what we already have? Mr.
I'll
Martinez.
go ahead and put in the form of a motion to go ahead and do it as we go along, and that way it'll be fresh in your mind, and then you can come back at the end and actually review it again, and you could still possibly change it and send it.
Okay, that's a.
I'll second that.
So would that be option B, Mr. Martinez, or?
What do you mean?
You said you wanted to come back and revisit, but yet you wanted to go article by article.
No,
so-
I'd say go article by article as it stands right now. But then after we vote on everything, when we finish with the whole charter, come back and look at it. And if anybody has any questions about those articles, don't just throw them in the basket once you finish with them, but you can come back and review.
So we're going to basically have a working list and vote as a whole at the end, like you had said.
Yeah.
Mr. Okay.
It's
Second.
okay.
I believe he made it in the form of a motion, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. We do have a motion and a second, but Mr. Lambert?
Question first. Don't y'all think that if we put too many items on there, people are gonna automatically vote them down? Now, I don't have an answer, I'm just throwing that out. I mean, if you put 10 or 12 or 15 things on there, we gone.
Well, as I appreciate it, this committee will make the recommendations back to the council. The council has the ultimate authority to permit or non-permit, as I appreciate it.
And change?
Yes, they do have the ultimate say-so, the council. We are just a committee. And there's a difference, as I read in the resolution, there's a difference between committee and commission,
Right.
per se. So the commission brought about this living document, the charter. The governing authority over that charter is the Ascension Parish Council, given authority by the electorate.
Yes,
So now, as I appreciate it, and correct me if I don't have it right, but as I appreciate it, we can go down in the individual articles like with Article 1, and if we decide that that's fine, it's suitable for as we see fit, and we decide to say, okay, no action, we'll move forward to Article 2. Am I correct? Now, if you want to change it, then quite naturally, the Robert Rules of Order will come in where the motion is placed on the table and the whole 9 yards. You vote it up or vote it down.
Well, I would move that we pass on section 1 and not recommend any changes to
Well, did
section
we
1.
never voted on,
Yeah.
we didn't vote on that procedural, did we?
No, we need to, as
Yeah.
a body of
So
the
we
whole.
have a motion and a second that was discussion Mr. Lambert had.
I just want to be clear that we're not precluding ourselves, because I think that we need to, at the very end of this, go back, look at it and make sure holistically it all fits together, that there are no contradictions in there. Before we start saying, hey, this article's good, this one's bad, we're going to change this, we need to go back at the end and make sure it all fits together like the puzzle it is.
Sure, and keep in mind.
Okay, so we're
the
not
public
precluding
will-
that.
The public will also have the opportunity to
Yes.
give its opinion on every step in the process. So
That'll work.
it's something that, we can accumulate and then revisit. There's no restrictions on revisiting any section or any subject matter that comes before us. So we're not held to that. So it's open. This is an open process, and hopefully the end result is something that we can recommend to the parish council. And if there's any tweaking or adjustments, then we can do it, vet it here, and then send that instrument to the parish council where they would bring it through their particular process.
So my concern, Mr. Chairman, would be if we're going to look at this holistically, which I'm fine with that approach, is at what point in time are we going to look at these 2 other proposals by outside groups? My concern would be that going item by item, article by article through this, we get stuck in the mud, in the weeds, and we never even get to the 2 proposals for us to vet those, which would vast differently from what we're going through in the current charter.
Now, as I appreciate it, any member, any one of us that would want to bring any organization or to insert any organization into this deliberative process, I don't think there are any restrictions. Quite naturally, the public will be here, organizations will be here. By way of signing in, they're sending us a signal, look, I want to speak on this subject matter. So
I think the restrictions you're going to have are found within, you can only have so much on an agenda. I think what Mr. Trosclair is talking about, these are a separate holistic plan, right? But I think there was a discussion before we went on camera. Open meetings law in Louisiana restricts us to discussing what is on the actual agenda, okay? Unless we're going to expand the agenda by unanimous vote of the body. So I don't know how we get into, for instance, a different group's version of Section 3-02 if we don't have that on the agenda, or we're going to get into and maybe that's the best way to go about it, compare and contrast ABA's version of this section with, I don't know. I mean, this is going to be a difficult process, and we got to at some point pick a procedure that we can adhere to and proceed.
I would agree with Mr. P.T. on that. My impression is that we'll have a motion on the floor to go through this article by article as an agenda. And again, my concern would be is we get stuck on the current for the next 8, 9, 10 meetings, however long it is, and we don't even visit at all RPEC's proposal or a Better Ascension's proposal. So they are vastly different, so they needed to be separate, in my opinion.
If you look at RPEC's proposal, RPEC suggested suggested amendments to specific sections of the charter. So as we go through the charter sections, all of RPEC's pending suggestions will come up just in the normal course of going through the charter. ABA is a different animal because what they're suggesting is, when we're discussing 3-01 qualifications of the parish president, I don't know how we take up in the same discussion qualifications of a parish manager. I don't, but at some point we're going to, is Mr. Trosclair suggesting that we block out a certain amount of time for ABA's proposal? Because I would have an issue with that. I mean, we're going to discuss what's in the current charter until we're finished discussing them. That's my intention. When anybody's got something to say about 3-01, they need to have the opportunity to say that. And the problem we're running into is we have suspended the rules, okay? Because this should rightly be done by a charter commission, which the last time we did this, the charter commission convened for 18 months. We're compressing that time to such an extent that something's going to have to give. Okay? I don't know that we can fully vet every charter article in 7 or 8 or 9 meetings. So I'm not going to lose any sleep if we don't get to ABA's proposal, frankly, when the committee of the whole, to my knowledge, is still convened and has not been disbanded with a specific task to make a recommendation with regard to a better Ascension proposal. So I'm not going to lose any sleep if Brandon doesn't get to make his pitch, frankly.
Well, as I appreciate it, I mean, quite naturally, the Charter Commission did take a span of 18 months, but the governing authority is the Ascension Parish Council. We have to revert back to the will of the council by way of its resolution. And again, it is to review the articles which make up the parish charter. So I think simplistically, we should charge ourselves with walking through every article from one to the end and discuss it and vet that through the process. So, yeah, the public will not be restrained from commenting, as I see it, as I appreciate it. This is an open forum, so unless we have another clear-cut or better sense of direction on this, I think we may be better off just going through article by article, those that's willing to comment, the public, then quite naturally, we want to entertain and then receive their comments. But it is ultimately the decision of this holistic body to move on a changing or continuing as is this charter commission as a committee. So I don't know if I'm muddying the water, but I want to make sure that we understand what our mission is and how we could best navigate from A to Z. PT.
I would agree with Chairman Cuiser. The mission, we just read it into the record. It didn't say anything about a better Ascension proposal. The mission statement, the task we have been given by the governing authority is to vet the existing charter. How we choose to do that in the confines or found within the four corners of the document. The task did not include, the resolution did not include a reference to a better Ascension unless I missed it. So if it doesn't make it in, we're still vetting the document in front of us.
Well, maybe I missed it as well. I mean, I think as a whole, we all benefit from perspective from diverse groups, rather it be citizens or individual groups or what we are vetting to be professionals or experts. Would it be feasible just to, I mean, within my packet, I received the homeroom charter, but also received packets from ABA and also other PACs. So I think it's to our right or our due diligence to the citizens to go over everything that we've been presented with and vet it, rather be on a separate item on a separate agenda or within each article that we go through. Preferably a different item set for a different day, another motion on the agenda.
Okay. Any other comment?
I would say I agree with Mr. Burnett here. I mean, if we want to revisit Mr. PT's comment, if we're going to vet just the current charter itself, me as a committee member, I think it's flawed. So I think the whole thing's flawed. We need to revisit that, and what's the other forms to fix this flaw? There's other forms of government in the United States as an option. So are we going to fix the thing, or are we just going to change up an already flawed document? I think our duty here is to examine all things, whether it needs to be fixed or not.
Well, all opinions will be respected, and we will bring it through the due process, the due diligence. So, yes, we need to have it open and move. I mean, we have to start from some point. And we need to start with Article 1, as I appreciate it. Mr. Martinez.
Well, it's going to be impossible to go through all these different forms, but, you know, if we go with ABA proposal, there's no use to even have a charter because you're changing the charter completely. You're taking out a whole branch of government, and I think that that's something that the council's gonna have to maybe have a committee on, a commission on, and make that decision and put it to the vote of the people if that's what they want. But I don't think we here as a group, we're gonna have time to look at all these different things. I mean, my idea is to look at what we have and to tweak this charter that we have and go about it. Not everybody thinks that the charter is bad as a whole. I think it just has a few things that need to be changed. So
I would disagree wholeheartedly, but if we take that approach, Mr. Martinez, why don't we just send it back to the council and put it up to vote to the people? They can vote to keep the current or vote for change. That's the approach you want to take, so let's give it right back to the people and put it on the ballot.
Council did have that opportunity. It was called Committee of the Whole, and they, before I know
And they
that,
sent in here.
I think, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
No, they did not. They never disbanded. The Committee of the Whole was never disbanded. It was tasked with vetting a Better Ascensions plan, and I heard Councilman Sally say this enough, shall make a recommendation with regard to a Better Ascensions proposal. That didn't happen, okay? That committee has never been disbanded. It didn't do its job, okay? Our charge, our task, what we have been directed to do by this resolution is to vet the contents of the existing home rule charter. If somebody wants to bring a suggestion, an idea from a Better Ascension or any other group and try to fit it within the confines of this document, the four corners of the document, I'm all ears. I'd like to hear it, okay? Nobody's being excluded.
Mr. Burnett?
No, I think Mr. PT, finished it out what I was going to respond on. I think, we're sitting here talking about, time well spent. I think if there's anything that want to be brought to the table and added to the agenda, I think that's what needs to be discussed. I mean, it's now almost 6 o'clock and we are yet to get through an article. If anything anybody brought to the table, to a previous meeting and it's brought to you as a chairman and we put on the agenda for the next meeting, so be it. But whatever's on the agenda, as like it's for night, we're supposed to go through these articles. Right. We've yet to. So we can't say that we don't have time to go through it because we do. Because thus far, I believe we've wasted a lot of time. So if this was on the agenda, then who's to say that we can't visit anything that anybody brings to the table, if it makes sense.
Okay. All right, let's move on with the business. Everybody should have a clear-cut understanding as to what we are attempting to do, what we're charged with doing. So to move with Article 1, we still need to, as read it into the minutes. So now,
I would make a motion that we recommend maintaining Article 1 of the Home Rule Charter as written.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Anyone opposing the motion?
I do.
Okay. We have an opposition of the motion, so now we need to take a roll call vote.
I'd like to hear Mr. Lambert's reason for it.
If you so feel that you would like to articulate that.
Thank you, Wade. And look, and I'm just part of the group, but I think that we have several reasons to look at something else. And I'm not saying do it or don't do it. I think it's important that we give people the opportunity to make a change if they want to change. I think we have a government that does a pretty good job, but that people inherently don't trust the system. The system that we have had has given us no clear-cut plan for roads, no clear-cut plans for sewer, and by evidence of 3,400 houses flooding in our parish, we don't have a viable drainage plan. Now, that's what we've been through. That's what we've done. That's what's worked for 24 years. I don't call that working for 24 years. Is there something better? I don't know. I think we owe it to the citizens of Ascension Parish to explore that option. So let's vote.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Now, keep in mind, we still need to receive public comment on the article that we're moving on. So we may have to suspend the vote on this motion, even though it's been made. We still need to listen. If anybody in the audience would like to comment on Article 1 as we're discussing it, then we would entertain that. Once we finish with the public commentary, then we come back and then we discuss or pick that motion up, vote it up or vote it down, because there is an objection. So quite naturally, we have to take a roll call vote. So is everybody in agreement with that process? I thought that we did. Okay, for clarity, there was a previous motion by Mr. Martinez, for which I thought was, maybe I missed it, was just suspended or withdrawn temporarily. And then we got into the reading of Article 1, which is on the agenda. So we need to, I don't know if we have to go back to Mr. Martinez's motion. Okay. Mr. Martinez, would you, because we suspend what we're doing now, would you please mention what you were, restate your motion?
My motion was to take section by section
Okay.
and go over it, as you said. And the question Mr. Dawson asked was, should we vote on it as we go, or should we vote on it after everything has been talked about, and then go back and vote on each of those different, I guess, resolutions that were passed. And mine was to take it step by step and go, and that way at the end come back and have time to review it and go from there.
Okay, so, but we had to start it with Article 1.
Well, that's right.
Well, I think we voted on that at the first meeting. We decided that we're going to go section by section. I don't think we need to vote on that again. I think that we already decided that.
Well, I'd like to.
Good.
So do we have a motion and a second?
We do have a motion by Mr. P.T.
And
No,
my
we have a
motion,
by Mr.
on Article
Martinez.
1.
But we also had a motion by Mr. Martinez and a second by Mr. Trosclair, I believe,
But
that
we-
we did not act on. No vote was taken.
But what Mr. Martinez's motion is the directive as to what we're doing.
No, I believe Mr.
We haven't
Martinez's
all agreed
motion,
on
if
that.
I'm not mistaken, was we're going to go, as we go along, we're going to set aside, make recommendations, but they're not going to be recommendations to the council at the end of it. When we take all of our recommendations together, then we're going to go, and I think Mr. Lawler mentioned a whole lot, I think that was Mr. Martinez's motion.
To vote on the whole thing at the end.
At the end.
That's fine, but as long as we take it a section at a time and look at it, and then make those motions about whatever changes you want, and then at the end, we vote on it.
Correct.
We vote on the changes.
Right.
And then at the end, vote on it, make the final vote.
And to start that process, we have to start with Article 1.
I'd like
So-
to get a clarification.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to get a clarification on the motion. So does that preclude bringing in an entire proposal such as the ABA proposal?
I don't think it would exclude anything,
Okay.
because we're going to have the public commentary.
I'm not trying to exclude anything, I just, for time's
Well, I
sake.
think that's where Mr. Lambert's comments came from, is I don't want to speak for Mr. Lambert, but his comments were directed towards, we're going to hear these ABA and these other proposals, or we're going to give them an opportunity to present. And if we walk through this and we only take one section at a time, and we don't vary from that, then that's going to probably inhibit their ability to present the entire proposal.
You had mentioned also, Mr. Chairman, that any committee member can change the agenda and bring in somebody whenever they wanted to.
Yes, we're open to expert testimony throughout this whole process.
At any time.
But, yeah, each member, you have the right to call in, and we add it to the agenda. But we have to start somewhere, folks.
I'm with you.
All right,
Well,
so,
right, but if we pass this, we've said that we're going with the whole new charter.
no. we pass this, it's going into a list of other things that this is the first one we're putting on the wall.
Okay, I'm
And
good.
then after the whole process is over with, we say, okay, we've made these 18 suggestion revisions. Now, committee of the whole, how do you want to vote on these? And we go down the list. So to me, this is the filtering, the initial vetting of the process where the public can engage, we can engage with the public, and then we would basically take a sticky note and put on the wall, say, okay, now let's go to Article 2. Let's vet this, as I appreciate it. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong. I want to do the will of the committee. Are we on the same page? So we voted yes tonight, Article 1. That doesn't mean at the end of this process, Article 1 will not be changed, because we will revisit, as Mr. Martinez has suggested.
So we're gonna go through everything, then revisit this first one?
We're going to revisit every change that we want to make to it,
Yeah.
then we can revisit. But the process is open. It's open until May 31st. So
I mean, does anybody have any suggested changes to section 1-01?
which is basically the
If not, I
introduction.
think we can move on to section 2-01 now. That's my motion.
Well, we have a I thought we had the motion from Mr. Martinez that we haven't voted on yet.
Didn't you have a motion to accept it? To accept Article 1?
I didn't make that
You
motion.
have a motion by Mr.
Are y'all
P.T.
confused?
I made a motion about how we were gonna go about it and then going section by section. I don't know if we voted on that.
Well, we voted on that last time.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, we decided to do that last time.
Yeah,
So-
Mr. Martinez is talking about the concept,
I guess that's what you.
which we've agreed to. Now,
Did we vote on that?
On Tommy's?
Yeah.
No.
No, we didn't. I
You
don't
had a
think so.
motion and a second, but you didn't, not this time, I mean, the motion he made.
Right, the motion being, we're not finalizing any recommendations. As we go through this, the initial vote will not finalize any recommendations that will be made to the parish council.
okay,
But they will be retained, and at the end of it, we'll have a list of itemized recommendations for further discussion, essentially, for lack of a better word. And not until the end will we come up with a formal recommendation to the council for A, B, C, D, and
But we haven't
ABA.
voted on that yet.
okay.
Haven't voted on it.
Let's do this, folks. Let's do this. Suspend Article 1. Let's go back to Mr. Martinez's motion and
He did.
vote it up, vote it down. Once we clear that, then we come back to Article 1. Is that amenable to everyone?
Yes, sir.
All right. Again, Mr. Martinez's motion is binding to the concept of listing possible changes, okay? Now, all those that's in favor, now it has been second. All those that's in favor of Mr. Martinez's motion, please signify by saying aye or listen to the roll call. Let's document it.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. P.T.?
yes.
Mr. Trosky?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes, ma'am.
Now we go to Article 1.
And I think I had a motion.
Yes, let's go to Mr. PT's motion.
I'll second.
My motion is to leave section 1-01 unchanged.
Have a motion?
Okay, well, we got public comments too. Yes. Yeah, this lady is first. Okay, public comment also should come in to this, because we said we're gonna listen to the public comment and then come back to the motion, correct? All right, so the first individual that we will hear from this evening is Ms. Lynette Villar Rodriguez. And please correctly state your name in case I messed it up into the record. And you have 3 minutes, ma'am.
I worked in schools for 35 years. I messed up a lot of names. Lynette Villar Rodriguez, and my husband and I reside in Prairieville. And I want to give each one of you a commendation for just committing to this process. Democracy is awesome. It's messy and it's exhaustive. And so thank you for taking your time and your care with taking a look at all this. I am representing a Better Ascension, and I just want to bring to the attention of this committee that's working and saying, yes, we've made forward motion. We made forward motion. We moved from a police jury system to the system we have now 25 years ago. But it comes to mind, there's a commercial on television, I don't know what it's for, but the guy's riding a bicycle with square wheels, and he keeps making forward motion, but he's not making a lot of motion for all the effort he's putting into it. And as a citizen in the parish, that's what I'm expressing, is that y'all have made the council has made a lot of forward motion, but it's been very laborious, and there's a better way, and that's where we came up with a Better Ascension, which is that there are other forms of government. We're not making this up out of thin air. There are thousands and thousands of communities have adopted and adjusted their forms of government as the cities and counties have grown, and for us, Parish has just grown explosively. This is no longer a form of government that can simply be done just by, I care and I want to do this. You have to have some expert help. And fortunately, we're not doing this in the sense where you're inventing the round wheel. The wheel's out there. There's a lot of research base on it. There is a professional organization that has over 10,000 members representing more than 185 million constituents that use a parish manager, county manager form of government. So we just want to encourage you, and I personally want to encourage you, to ask the questions, get the information in. As a counselor, I've always gone by the rule that the Lord gave us 2 ears and one set of lips. So we try to listen twice as much as we speak, and that's what I'm asking for y'all. Listen to everything. Let the people take a look and make the decision, but be very open to what is happening outside of our very own parish, what's happening outside of our state. Look at Texas, look at Mississippi, look at North Carolina. Research and ask them, what can you do? What can you bring to us that will make our government more efficient? A 10% savings is what they say in the literature, and that's a $13 million savings. As Mr. Van said, looking at having a more comprehensive plan to better our parish, we don't have to invent that. We can investigate that with expert help and say, let's charge this person, the parish manager, with researching this and bringing it to the council members. The council members should not have to work as exhaustively as they do. We should be able to give them a better assistance. So thank you all for listening. And is that a bell ringing?
Precisely. Thank you for your
All right,
comments.
thanks.
Okay, next. Okay, the next two cards that we had are specifically referencing section 7A, 7B, 7C, E,
That's the,
G, and H.
that's agenda item.
In particular, Mr. Clint Quintmore and Jeff P.T. I don't know if we will get Pettit, Jeff Pettit, I'm sorry. I don't know if we'll get to that section 7. You can see we're still on
Those
section
are
1.
agenda items.
But those are
Yeah, we're not even
agenda
there yet.
items.
We're not even there yet for this comment.
Seven, that's the Article 3 Executive Branch.
We're not there yet.
No, we're not there yet, but it's agenda items, isn't
I
it?
don't have the, looking for the,
You got your copy of the agenda? Give me those. They're gonna come up with a-
It's gonna go fast.
okay, yes. Well, you all will be heard when we get to that. Okay,
And this is the same one.
same one, number 7. Okay, I'm sorry. We will get to that. Hopefully, wishfully, prayerfully. All right, okay. Now, we'll go back to Mr. P.T.'s motion for adoption. It has been second. Hearing any opposition to that motion? Are there any opposition to the motion?
What was the motion again?
The motion was to accept Article 1 as written within the charter. Okay, hearing no opposition, still let's have the roll call vote. Madam Secretary.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. PT?
Mr. PT,
Oh, Mr. PT.
Not present. Over there.
you got to vote.
Oh.
We're
Your
vo-
motion.
Just yell yes.
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Lawler? Mr. Martinez? Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous. All right, next on the agenda is Article 2, form of government, Article 2, powers and functions.
I make a motion that we accept it as is.
Second.
And we're going to ask, before any further commentary, I don't have any cards from the audience on that particular section, so the board is clear to move forward with the motion. Any discussion on the motion, any opposition? Hearing none. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Quasar,
Yes.
question
Mr. Lambert.
first. I think in the whole document, every time where it says the parish, I think it should say Ascension Parish. It personalizes the whole thing more, but I don't think that's something that we ought to have to bring to the vote of people. Just to clarify the document, instead of, the parish, it should say Ascension Parish.
Ascension Parish.
I'll second that. I'll second that motion, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
All right, that's in its recommendation form. So the motion is to substitute Ascension Parish where it has the parish.
It just makes it sound better.
Okay, it's a point of clarity.
Everywhere in the whole kit and caboodle.
Okay, well, that'll be a standing, this motion passed. I don't hear any opposition. That'll be a standing motion, so we can substitute Ascension Parish for the parish. All right, Madam Secretary, could we have a roll call on that?
One question. Is there somewhere in the charter, just a housekeeping matter, is there somewhere in the charter where it references contracting with other parishes? Or am I reading something into it? I'm not sure. I mean, we're talking about the motion being to change every time the word parish appears, where it talks, the motion is to change every one of those to Ascension Parish. I know there is an article that talks about contracting with outside entities. I just want to make sure that it doesn't reference, say, other parishes, because that motion would make it say other Ascension parishes.
But would not, if Ascension Parish would be engaged with any other parish, would not that be by way of contract? The contract would bring clarity to.
Well, what I do understand is you can't amend the charter. It takes a vote of the people to amend the charter. So at some point, if we're amending the charter, we might as well get it, if we're doing something to make it more, to give it more clarity. I mean, I've got a for instance here. It has to do with the parish attorney. So every time you're talking about parish attorney, it's going to say Ascension Parish Attorney, because it says it over and over and over and over. And that's fine if that's what you want to do, but.
Is that the intent of the author? Or you just want to give designation to Ascension Parish?
I think when we're
not
referring to the parish, it should be Ascension Parish. Now, if it's a different particular person, that's okay.
So we're not focused on the word, we're focused when the reference is
Naming
being
Ascension
made to
Parish.
the parish.
Right.
Okay.
And if we got if that has to be brought to the people, I don't think we ought to get involved in that.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can amend the charter, that has to be, the only way that can be done is by a vote of the people. That's the only way you can amend this charter.
Well, I would say we leave it on the list and we'll look at it at the end.
I don't think it's that critical. Just for clarity, just.
Okay, so we're,
Withdrawing that motion? No, he's leaving
no,
it. We'll
leaving the
use it.
motion on.
We'll revisit it
Yeah,
as a whole.
that's one of the sticky
Stickers on
notes.
the wall.
So we will not, but we've taken a vote on it, so let's move on. Okay, Article 3, Executive Branch, Section 3-1,
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we took a vote.
I don't think we did
I
either.
thought we did not.
Did we?
On Article 2, you have a motion by Aaron and a second by Wade, but you were about to do a roll
I'm
call.
moving, excuse me, I'm just moving fast. Let's take the roll call vote.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. P.T.?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Lawler? Mr. Martinez? Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, now, we'll go to Article 3, Executive Branch, Section 3.01, Qualifications. That is an agenda item,
Number 7, so you have some public speakers.
yes. Okay, let me read it into the record, and then we'll go into the, well, let's do this. Since it is lengthy, let's go ahead and hear the comments from the two individuals. Three individuals that have submitted a request to speak. Let's start with Kim Christie. Would you please come forward?
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Christie, and I live in Prairieville. A Better Ascension has told the residents of Ascension Parish they are offering amendments when, in fact, they are offering the repeal of the Ascension Parish Homeroom Charter and replacing it with the ABA Charter. ABA has told the residents of Ascension Parish that they are a Homeroom Charter Commission when they were not appointed by the Parish Council. Now, on this night, ABA may state the reason for the parish manager is in order to have a qualified person serve in the leadership position of the parish. And they attempt to guarantee the character of the individual appointed because the industry standard is adherence to the International County Manager Association, the ICMA Code of Ethics. According to the ABA Charter, the nominating committee is composed of at least 3 people from the Chamber of Commerce or Rotary Club. Theoretically, all 7 could be from the business community. The ABA Charter allows the parish manager to fraternize with members of the Chamber of Commerce and Rotary Club. Eventually, that parish manager will see the individuals who sat on the nominating committee who were responsible for passing their name on to the parish council. First, one has to ask, why is that language included in the ABA Charter? Had the parish manager organically became a member of either organization, there may not have been a concern. However, the ABA Charter contradicts the ICMA Code of Ethics. Tenet 3 guidance of the ICMA Code of Ethics states, members should conduct their professional and personal affairs in a manner that demonstrates that they cannot be improperly influenced in the performance of their official duties. The language in the charter gives the parish manager cover for violating the Code of Ethics. It also creates a conflict of interest and makes the parish manager position no less political than the parish president position. The only difference, instead of political promises, the parish manager will cater to business interest. My point, ABA created this conflict in their document, which is counterintuitive to what they pretend to want to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next, we have Mr. Jeff Pettit. I'm sorry, Mr. Jeff Pettit.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not related to Mr.
Okay.
I'll make that clear to everybody.
Is Jeff
up
Pettit
here.
of the superfluous T and the unearned E.
I don't have the extra E on my name. I know how to spell. So
Got you.
I have a question for you real quick before the clock starts, Mr. Chairman. We have several items listed under number 7.
Yes.
Is it 3 minutes to all of those in total, or can we address or is the committee going to address each one individually?
Well, we're going to address each one individually because we need to move on each section.
Okay. 3 minutes to cover all of these in a public comment is going to be hard. Sir? Each one. Okay, so we're just doing 7A right now?
We're doing 7A right now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Jeff Pettit, and I live just outside of the city limits of Gonzales. We're talking about the qualifications of the parish president here under our current home rule charter. Currently, one only need reside in and be a qualified elector of the parish for a period of 2 years, immediately preceding the time established by law for qualifying for the office of parish president. The revision my group suggested that we came up with, which is Ascension Citizens Group, was to raise the residency requirement, be it 5 years, be it 10 years, or just to consider it and talk about it. And the reason being, Ascension is an attractive destination for new residents, as evidenced by the population influx over the last few decades. Outside money and political influence have pervaded our once rural community, transforming localized areas in North Ascension into exurbia for Baton Rouge and other areas. While other areas, the West Bank especially, have languished. We saw in the 2015 parish president's race a candidate whose roots were somewhere other than Ascension. He ran for the parish presidency. He was well-financed and considered the favorite to succeed Mr. Martinez. That gentleman failed in his bid. He picked up stakes and fled Ascension Parish, the parish that he professed to love so much. We think that a greater period of residency should be considered for someone who wants to seek this very important office to all the residents of Ascension Parish. Somebody that has roots here, be they new or old, but has a stake in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Mr. Clint Quintmore. Section
Good
A.
evening. Yes, Section A. And talking with different residences, families, coworkers, they all had an issue with the time requirement. As you look there, as a 4-year term, the 2-year residency isn't even a full term. And so what I would like this committee to do is discuss that thoroughly, because I personally don't feel someone who just moves here for such a short period of time understands our values, understands the diversity of each of our communities, such as Santa Monica versus Geyser and Dutchtown and the West Bank and East Bank in a 2-year time. I would hope y'all debate that particular topic and hopefully come up with another suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion from the committee? Any commentary whatsoever from the committee on section 3-01, qualifications? Mr. Dawson?
Well, I appreciate the comments of somebody, being here for a long period of time. One of the things that I think we have to be careful with is that, you could have somebody that lived here for 30 years and they missed a year, a few years before the election. It didn't qualify them as being a candidate. If we put something here that you have to be, resident for these 5 or 10 years immediately preceding the election, then you could perhaps have somebody that was a 30 or 40 year resident and wasn't a resident for weeks or months during that 4 or 5 year period. So I just think we need to be real careful of it. I think we also, perhaps need to think about state law. I don't know where it is on this, Mr. Chair, and also, what do some of our neighboring parishes do? I think maybe this would take a little more looking into, if you will.
And certainly we'll research what state law is as well as surrounding parishes.
Well, I know that Livingston has only a 1-year requirement, but I know Livingston only has a 1-year requirement. I looked at some of the neighboring parish charters in preparation here. I think it's a valid point. I'm a lifer here in Ascension Parish. I know some of you aren't. I'm not one of these guys that say, my way or the highway. I think we've got an attractive product. I think, the points made by a couple of speakers are correct. We have too often given that very attractive product away. For whatever reason, people want to move to Ascension Parish. We've been blessed, I say blessed, we've been very fortunate to attract a lot of investment here in Ascension Parish. So there's a lot of money flowing through Ascension Parish, and it makes us very attractive. I would feel much more comfortable with a residency requirement more than 2 years. I don't think that evinces or evidences any commitment to this parish. I'm 50 years old, and I spend every day of my life here in this parish. Not that is the be-all, end-all, but I do think it is not too much to ask somebody who wants to come and be the chief executive officer of Ascension Parish to have lived here and resided here more than 2 years. Thank you.
Okay. Any further commentary? Mr. Martinez? And then Mr. Lawler.
When the original Home Rule Charter Commission met, basically they went and they visited all the different parishes and visited all the charters. Maybe before we do any action, have any action on this item, maybe we should ask Cinnamon in the next week or so to look at different parishes and to see what the residency requirement is in those parishes, and maybe if there's a lot of them that have more than 2 year requirement, well, then maybe we can look at that too and make a decision at that point.
Is that a motion, Mr. Martinez?
A suggestion.
It's just a suggestion at this point. But I think next, when we go to the final version, we'll come back at that, and maybe if we'll have that information in front of us, we'll make a better decision.
So in effect, what we're saying is the procedure we've agreed upon, this is the first one that makes the list of items to come back and revisit. Is
That's
that fair?
Yes. After we get more information.
Right.
But it's still on the table. It's something we will come back to.
Yes.
Definitely. Mr. Lawler.
A couple things. This kind of presupposes the need for a president, but I'm not going to go there at this moment. I don't know if we should be electing presidents or any elected official, for that matter, based on how long they lived in an area or because they've resided in a certain area for a certain amount of time. That doesn't imbue that person with any amount of knowledge that's necessarily beneficial to running a parish. And that's one of my concerns is we are looking for the best people to run Ascension Parish. And if we're going to look at, hey, you have to live here 10 years, that doesn't mean the person that's lived here 10 years can run it any better than the person that's been here for 2 years. And quite frankly, we are not a rural parish anymore. We are a parish that is growing rapidly, and we have to keep up with the change with what we're growing, at which we're growing. We have different needs than we did 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. So it's nice to have somebody to come into the parish that does have a different worldview. And, having lived in a parish for 40 or 50 years doesn't always tell me that person has a worldview that, we may not want to hear different options. I may want to have somebody that's lived in California for a while, that's lived up on the East Coast, that's lived in Kansas or Minnesota, has seen different ways of doing things. Because quite frankly, the way we've been doing things, and I'm going to echo Mr. Lambert, we've been doing things the same way for 20 or 30 years now. Maybe it's time to look at something different for a different way of doing things, and you don't always get that with somebody that's lived in the same place for 40 or 50 years. So having a long-term residency requirement, I think, kind of pushes back against the parish. And I do come from an area where a lot of people have moved into, but I know my friends and neighbors, I've got people that I'm in my neighborhood from California, Hawaii, Ohio, Michigan, and I've met people that have seen all different types of things and compensated or worked with growth where they're from Houston, from Austin, that have seen growth and have handled it in different ways. And I think some of these ideas would be great for us as a parish. So if we have somebody that's only lived here for 2 years, I'll say only lived here. Well, they've lived for a lot longer than that. Rather than a residency requirement, I think it may be beneficial if we looked into something more of an age requirement. I don't know if it's necessarily good to have somebody 18 years old running for the parish president. United States president has to be 35 years old. So maybe we should look into something like that also.
Okay, good comment. Any other comment? No further discussion on it? Okay, what's the will of the committee? As they said, certainly it seems as though it will definitely be revisited. So,
Do we need to somebody need to make a motion to that effect, or, well,
Move to revisit this later?
to revisit.
Second.
with the condition that Cinnamon or somebody else comes back with some kind of review of the way other municipalities do it, and not that it matters to me,
Yeah.
but
Look at all the qualifications, Cinnamon, if you would,
Yes.
not just the residency requirements,
Yeah.
but any other requirements that they do have.
yeah, and I'm not overly concerned with how other parishes do it, but
Well, not-
So is that a motion?
Motion and a second.
Motion
There we
and
go.
second. We have the roll call.
What are we voting on?
This is to
Revisit.
revisit.
Okay, good. I'm good.
Yes.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
yes.
Mr. P.T.?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Revisit all of them.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, unanimous. We'll move on to Section 3-02, compensation. Mr. Jeff Pettit, you have denoted that you would like to speak on that section also, followed by Mr. Quentmore.
Compensation. Our current charter, the president shall receive a minimum salary of $55,000. The current charter also vests the governing authority with the power to change the salary without any minimum or maximum. We think that's unfair. It doesn't reflect the duties and responsibilities of the position. We would suggest to be considered, maybe tying the parish president's salary to an average of, say, the sheriff, the assessor, and the clerk of court. Pick the highest two, average them, and that's the parish president's salary. It would more accurately reflect the duties and responsibilities of the job. It would also take some of the politics out of with the council having the ability to set the salary. And we would also say that no changes can be made to the parish president's salary during the term of office. It's set at the beginning, and then it would hold for his or her whole term. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Quentmore.
I want to echo Mr. Pettit's comments, but go on to a little further of the history of the parish president's pay and how it was tied to the drainage board and compensation here or there. I think this is a good opportunity to clear up this language. And if you would want to tie it to the sheriff, if you're going to tie it to something, I don't know how you can restrict it within the term. It should be adjusted to that benchmark whenever that benchmark adjusts. But nonetheless, this is a good opportunity not only to adjust the parish president, but also the council. Having council members to vote their raises is a very difficult political thing to do. And so the opportunity to fix not only this salary, but the council salary exists here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comment, Mr. Lawler?
Just so everybody knows, the council was already working on this, tying it to the salaries, and forgive me if I'm not exact on this, but like the assessor, the sheriff, maybe the school superintendent, we're already working on an ordinance on this, so it may be moot by the time we get to that point. Clerk of court, yes.
It wouldn't be moot, though, because there's going to be a council that follows you. Now, you understand that you weren't, probably, I don't know if you were here or not, but in the history of Ascension Parish, okay, we've had situations where a recalcitrant council exacted punitive measures against a unpopular parish president. I don't know if you remember that, but and I don't want to get into that history and bring up personalities and all that. But an ordinance, can be changed by a couple of changing seats on the body. That's why, if it's a good idea, and I do think it's a good idea, in fact, to establish this in the Home Rule Charter. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the commission, well, I know this because I'm looking at the document, but in 2008, 2009, this was also part of what the Charter Commission took up and actually made a recommendation.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we're not, what I'm saying is we're going to let the council do the work and write the ordinance, and we can then add that at the end. We don't have to discuss it all. It's already being written up right now as to, who we're tying it to. So we'll have language. We can just take that language, and at the end of this, when we stick it on the wall, we'll put it off the wall and use that language.
Well, I mean, the council doesn't need us to do that. If 2/3 of the council wants to put that on the ballot, they don't need this committee to do that. So I would not interject what the council's doing here. We've got an assignment here. So my position on this doesn't change. Now, if you want to bring in some language and let's discuss it and make a recommendation, that'd be great.
That's what's going to happen at the end.
Okay, Mr. Martinez.
Yes, I think it needs to be voted on by the people and become part of the charter as a permanent change, because the way it works now, just as was stated earlier, I mean, it says a minimum of $55,000. If you don't like the parish president, guess what? You can drop the salary to $55,000 in a heartbeat. So I think that the only way you're going to change this, and two, again, if you want to look at bringing in more qualified candidates into this race, you need to set that salary at a certain, I mean, nobody's going to leave a $150,000, $200,000 job to come here and maybe get $55,000 after it's all said and done. I mean, it just doesn't make business sense or any kind of other sense. So I think that the recommendation should be to tie, right now, the assessor in Ascension Parish makes $170,000, the sheriff $159,000, the clerk of court $139,000, the district attorney $150,000, parish court judge $152,000. The original intent of the original Home Rule Charter Commission was that for the first 2 years it would be $55,000, and after that they were tied to the sheriff's salary. That was the original intent, but it never got past the council to do that. So I'm just giving you history, and I know that the only way it's going to work is if you change it in the charter.
Thank you for the historical overview. That's informative. Okay, any further comment, Mr. Dawson?
I'd like to make a motion to revise this to make it the average of the sheriff, the assessor, and the clerk of court, and strike this sentence: the president shall receive an average of salary of the sheriff, the assessor, and the clerk of court, and to be evaluated every year except for the last year of their term.
Okay, so you're going to average those three?
Right.
Okay, all right, for clarity. Ms. Cazzo has already second. You want to third it?
I'd like to interject a discussion.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna further discuss it.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that as well. But if you read, we're going to run into the problem of, if we change, there's some companion ordinances that I think need to be kind of considered in combination with this. And what I have in the ones I have in mind are, let's see, Section 3-03, which states that the president shall receive only compensation payable to him as parish president. Now, as a matter of fact, I think Mr. Lawler actually in discussion brought this to my attention several weeks ago, that looking at the 2018 budget, there are other sources of income. And I don't know if as it turned out in the 2018 budget, it looked like 2/3 of the president's salary was paid from parish funds. A combination, the other third came from a combination of East Ascension Consolidated Gravity Drainage District, the West Ascension Gravity Drainage District and ACUD1. Now, I don't know how that came about, or if it's something that needs to be addressed, and I think it needs to be considered. Whether or not it needs to be corrected and clarified in the charter, I'm not sure, but I do think it's something that we need to be considering. The other one is 3-06, which talks about precludes the parish president from holding any compensated appointed parish government office or employment. I think you run into some of the same problems because maybe there's a cooperative endeavor agreement between the drainage districts, and I bet former President Martinez can clarify this for us, so I'll shut up and maybe he's got something to add.
Yes, there's been an agreement in place since the parish president's been in office with West Ascension Drainage and East Ascension Drainage. And basically, I think that motion that Bill made needs to encompass that includes both of those, and that each drainage board pay a percentage. So maybe when you put it as something on the ballot, that needs to be put into it. That'll be no more than that, which would include that, and then specifically come up with a percentage.
Well, I think I would like to change this and add that, I'd like to strike this sentence about the governing authority may change the salary by ordinance. Now, as far as this West Ascension Drainage and East Ascension Drainage, what budget his salary comes out of, I don't know that we won't need, charter needs to get that far into the details. But setting a salary is, to me, the most important step that we can make. And as far as whether it comes out of this budget hole or that budget hole, I'm not sure. Myself, I don't think that belongs in the charter, but hey, it's...
My point was that you don't want them to come back and say, okay, we're going to do another contract with the East Ascension Drainage and West Ascension Drainage and add another $50,000 to it.
Well, and I'm kind of wondering myself as far as this, and I've wondered this publicly, that the charter says he shall receive only the compensation payable to him as parish president. To me, that's fairly clear. And so, I do kind of wonder, what legal background or what legal authority we're using to pay, from other sources. But I do agree with you in principle that the parish president needs to receive this salary. That needs to be the only salary that he or she receives, and it shouldn't be something at the whim of the governing authority.
Well, I would say that's the point I'm trying to make. I mean, what portion, I believe, that the parish president makes in the neighborhood of 148 or so, somewhere around 150. And according to the budget, 2/3 of that comes from parish funds, 1/3 of it comes from extraneous funds. So how does that and I don't know. I mean, I don't know where the money comes from. I just know where it's budgeted. I don't know what funds the checks are written out of. But, Mr. Dawson brought up this very point, that the president is precluded from holding any other compensated appointed parish government office or employment. Well, am I incorrect in my understanding that the parish president and the administration has some administrative duties with regard to East Ascension and West Ascension drainage? And if so, is he compensated for them? Because if he is, then I would suggest that 3-06 is being violated every time the president collects a paycheck. So, I mean, I think it's worth getting some clarity here.
If I may, like I said, if we just throw this on the wall, this is being worked on in tying all this together, seeing your points about the other payments. We're all talking about kind of the same thing here, but people are actually working on this.
I would love to see the work product, but I haven't yet. So,
what's the time frame?
Well, it's, we're talking about it now, but when we throw it on the wall, we're supposed to go revisit this later on. We'll be able to get it sooner rather than later. But all of these concerns have been heard, and people are working on them.
no offense, Mr. Lawler, but I'm not all that trusting of this council either. I'm the ultimate cynic here. I don't trust. The fact that you say you're working on it lends no comfort, gives me no comfort, okay, because that is no assurance. I don't want to get into recent history here, but that gives me no comfort. So if you want to give me the work product, let me vet it, maybe that'll satisfy me and I'll be quiet.
You're no one special. You don't get special work products.
Okay, then I re-urge my statement earlier. Okay, I'm so unconcerned with what you're doing or pretending to be doing on this council because, sir, you are no one special either.
Well. Let's not get personal. Let's stay focused on the business at hand. Now, we're talking about a process. Maybe there may be some other internal processes under the Administrative Procedure Act, which governments can, and executive administrative branches of government can also execute. So conceptually, I think we're on the same page as far as bringing that salary into a certain range or a certain scope. That's where we need to leave it, and then when we revisit, then maybe more particulars can come, well, I assure you, more particulars should come to the table then that would give more specifics, okay, whether we can, or whether the parish governing authority can go into the east or west Ascension drainage funds. I mean, there's statute that dictates that. So let's focus on the range. Mr. Lambert, you've been wanting to say something.
I think we ought to apply the Nick Saban rule. I think the parish president ought to be the highest paid person in the parish, working for parish government. But instead of it being $1 million over the Texas A&M coach, it ought to be maybe $1,000 over the highest paid parish employee. Just food for thought.
Food for thought. It's all in the general concept.
So is that a
again,
revision to the motion? So we have a motion and a second. And is that a revision, Mr. Lambert?
I would think that the motion then would encapsulate the range.
Yeah, food for
bringing
thought.
that consistency, okay? And then we come back with the particulars at a later date on the wall.
I mean, is that reasonable?
I believe it is. I mean, as long as we're recognizing the potential conflict between these various.
Right, good.
As long as we recognize that conflict
Yeah.
and noting it, we'll come back to it. So I think that is reasonable.
Okay, can we get a vote on that, Cinnamon?
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Peety?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes, ma'am.
Unanimous.
Okay, unanimous. All right. Next section is section 3-03, powers and duties of the president.
Chairman, I'd like to address B.
B? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, oh, I'm sorry. I thought we had completed that. My fault. Let me withdraw that. We have to do section B under compensation, which reads, the governing authority by ordinance may adopt a system of reimbursement upon presentation of properly documented receipts of reasonable expenses necessary to the performance of official duties of the president and in compliance with state law. That was my oversight. So section B would, under compensation, would deal with the proper documentation of receipts and or reasonable expenses necessary to the performance of the official duties of the parish president. Mr. Martinez.
Let me say, in the years that I was parish president, that was never done. There was never any type of reimbursement policy in place. And I think that, I mean, if you want to take a prospective plant manager out or something, business that was coming to Ascension, you didn't have that authority. Okay. So, you know, I think that governing authority by ordinance shall adopt a system. I think just change that word.
Second.
Motion to change the language from may, the governing authority from the wordage of may to shall, which is more definitive. That's the motion that's on the floor. Any objections to the motion? Hearing none, let's go with the recorded vote. Yes, roll call.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Peety?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. So we've covered both sections, under compensation, both section A and B. Now, we're going to section 3-03, powers and duties of the president. We have the two speakers again, Mr. Pettit, followed by Mr. Quentmore.
Powers and duties of the president. Right now, Section B says the president shall have the power to appoint, subject to ratification by resolution, by at least a majority of the members of the governing authority, such officers and department heads as may be provided by this charter or by ordinance. Something for y'all to maybe consider. Recently, the Parish Council enacted an ordinance clarifying and codifying the ratification process. Should that corresponding language be added to the charter to eliminate any confusion? That was one. You already talked about the compensation from the 2 drainage boards and all that. The other one is, in E and F, the president shall have the power to remove all employees. However, the governing authority shall have the power to reinstate any employee upon a 2/3 vote of the members of the governing authority. Y'all need to look at that also, because the language in that F directly conflicts with Section 5-04 C2, which was recently amended to reduce the requisite vote to reinstate such employees to 2/3 majority vote of the governing authority present at the appeal. So one's in conflict with the other. So it's just a matter of cleaning up what was recently passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Quintmore.
Mr. Pettit's obviously done his homework, because he took care of E and F for me. G, parish president shall submit monthly reports to the governing authority on parish finances and may require any parish officer or employee to report the governing authority when necessary for the proper administration for the parish. Is that currently being done? Isn't that made a public document for the public to review? I'm not sure.
Can any one of our sitting
Yes, it is.
parish council persons answer? Ms. Cazzo?
Yes, it is.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on Section 303, powers and duties of the president? If not, let's entertain a motion. Mr. Martinez?
Under this, the president has the power to appoint subject and also to hire and everybody too. So, I mean, what basically, I understand that the parish secretary is now going to be council. Is that correct? It's going to be a council secretary?
Still subject to the pleasure of the parish president.
That's the way you're going to leave it that way? Y'all okay with that?
Well, I think when we get to the governing authority, I think we need to put that in. We need to put that in the charter. That's one of those. We did it through an ordinance, but when we get to that section on the governing authority or on the secretary treasurer, but.
Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Beatty.
And this may be extraneous as well, but a lot has been made recently about qualifications and education, educational backgrounds, and getting into the duties and the powers of the president. The president has the ability to make these appointments subject to ratification. I understand that and maybe this is a question I just need some clarification on, because I know the council did pass several ordinances that some of it had to do with ratification, some of it had to do with qualifications of different directorships. I would like to ask the council members here if maybe they could explain the ordinance and discuss some of the qualifications that are included in those ordinances corresponding to different positions, if that would be possible. Just very briefly, I mean, I know I don't remember what they are offhand, but an infrastructure division director is one that I think we created that position, right?
Yes, we did.
Did that come with qualifications attached to it?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And all of those positions that were departments or positions that were established, they all had their own qualifications, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. And I should have read those ordinances, and I apologize for not doing so.
Well, let's clarify one thing.
Anybody can understand it. It's in plain English.
Now, Mr. Lawler.
The ordinances that we passed, they didn't spell out the qualifications. you know, but what we had qualifications when we went out on the search for these people. So those ordinances that, particularly if you talk about the ratification process, there's nothing in there about qualifications of those people that are ratified, but it does spell out which positions will be ratified.
Well, maybe this is an opportunity for Mr. Trosclair and ABA to interject, because I didn't study their proposal, but I believe that they do include some positions that mandate certain qualifications. Is that something, you know, is that something that should be discussed or possibly included in this charter? And I'd ask Mr. Trosclair to comment.
I was just about to bring that up. I mean, at what point in time do we visit in conjunction with this? Because basically, Section 3 as a whole is totally different than the proposal from ABA. So I'm asking you, Chairman, you want to just keep voting on this section by section and totally revisit, or you want me to start interjecting what other proposals are out there? Because we'll be here all day on Section 3.
Well, I mean, and if in fact you would like to bring those individuals again from ABA, other experts, to testify, then we can do that by just putting them on the agenda. But as the agenda is printed tonight, we want to proceed as it's printed.
Fair enough.
And then come back and revisit.
Yeah.
Okay? Any other comments?
One additional, and again, I called this from a review of a Better Ascension proposal and did a little bit of some other parishes' homebrew charters. And I saw some language about parish president or parish manager in the ABA's case as an obligation to the council to propose. I think Livingston has a specific 5-year capital improvement budget to the governing authority. That's in Livingston's charter. And maybe not Livingston, I've looked at a lot of different charters, but other municipalities do have requirements of the president to bring forth multi-year, in this case, capital improvement plans or development plans. They call it different things. I mean, that does not exist in our Section 3-03, and maybe that's something that this committee might like to recommend or consider.
Ms. Cazzo, then Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, I agree with Wade. I think that multi-year budgeting is important, and that so we should have a modification on Section H that reflects the need for a 5-year budget, capital budget. And I want to elaborate that I guess I missed what you said about the ordinances and the qualifications for those folks, but Mr. Dawson clarified. Thank you.
Mr. Lambert?
I'm just agree with Ms. Casso. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Lawler.
Yeah, I think we should. I agree with Wade on this, but I also thought
Thank
maybe
you,
that
Aaron.
would go in the I thought that would go in the finance section because they do go into action of budgets, budget message, submittal of budgets in more detail in that section. That may be a good time to visit that.
Of course. I'm sorry. 1 second, Brandon. I'm just, the other charters that I've looked at in preparation here, they do specifically say the parish president or the president shall propose, and it's an affirmative duty on the president, which I think it's if we're going to still have a parish president, I think that might be a wise thing, a wise duty, obligation to impose on the parish president. And I think it would fit here. I'm sorry.
I actually agree with Mr. Wade again as well, but I think I understand your stance on the finance part, but maybe a finance and a plan, a written plan, it goes in conjunction. Don't just throw out a budget of X amount of dollars without a plan to spend that budget. So maybe they are in conjunction.
Be the same as a business plan.
Correct. I'll go ahead and make a motion in that we recommend, and again, I understand we're going to be tinkering with this, but it would be J, I suppose, Section J of 3-03 of the charter, to read, the president shall propose a 5-year capital improvement budget to the governing authority.
Can we consider maybe adding to that same motion years prior? I mean, to get to a 5-year, you have to have a 1, 2, 3, 4-year plan as well. Can we make that part of that motion?
I am receptive to that substitute motion.
If that's the case, I'll second Mr. PT's motion.
Okay, so we're going with the chronological years. 1, 2, 3, 1 through 5. 1 to 5. Okay. Any opposition?
Do we want
Mr.
a
Hernandez?
plan and then cover the budget in the finance section and make them match? But do we just want maybe a 1 to 5 year plan?
My thinking, and this is rudimentary, you guys that are professionals here, that if we have a budget, I think a budget, it behooves, if you're going to get these things paid for, you got to do them both at the same time. You have to know, you have to budget out for 5 years or as long as you can. Realistically, I understand that the taxes fluctuate a little bit. Sometimes you got more, sometimes you got less. But I think it just makes sense to me that you identify capital projects or other areas that we need to invest in this parish, and tie some funding source and mechanism to that plan. I think it's the only rational way to go about it. But
Okay, we have the motion, which would be section J. Is that appreciated?
yes.
Okay, as articulated by Mr. P.T.
Are you suggesting that it be a whole nother, I mean, we couldn't just modify H?
I'm receptive to however, if anybody wants to make the substitute and get the gist of it in, I'm receptive to it, and I will take no offense to that substitute motion, unless it comes from Aaron.
Question. Member Cazzo, Terry Cazzo just asked, could not we incorporate that into alphabet H? Would that, or we need to create another
Just prepare
J?
5-year budget.
I mean, if we're doing this and making a list of things we're going to come back to, either way, I'm fine either way. So,
What's your pleasure? H or J? Combine it into H or create a new one? J?
well, I got a motion that was second. If somebody wants to substitute,
I'd like to make a substitute motion, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to incorporate all the discussion about multi-year budgeting and strategic planning into item H.
I'll second that motion.
All right. It's been moved and second.
We was waiting on that.
That
Little
the subject matter is incorporated into item H of that section. Any opposition to that motion? Hearing none, let's go with the roll call vote.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. P.T.?
yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes, ma'am.
Unanimous.
Okay. To Mr. P.T. and Mr. Lawler, I will submit a request for hazardous duty pay for all of us that have to sit here and endure the sparring that seems to arise almost instantaneously between the two of you all. Okay, let's move. Next is section 304, which is the presidential veto, which is item D on your 7D on your agenda. Now we have Mr. Okay, we have no comments from the audience per se. So that is dealing with the presidential veto. Let me read it right quick, and then let's go with the discussion. The president may veto an ordinance, code, resolution, or line item in the budget ordinance within 10 days after enactment. The right to veto shall also extend to disapproving or reducing individual appropriation items in the budget or any ordinance, code, or resolution except appropriations for auditing or investigating any part of the executive branch or those that propose amendments to the Home Rule Charter or establish, alter, or modify governing authority procedure. Whenever the president exercises the veto, he shall immediately notify all governing authority members of the action by the same methods of notification of a special meeting as spelled out in section 4-05B. The president shall call a special meeting of the governing authority to be held within 10 days of the veto, unless a regular meeting is to be held within the 10-day period. At such meeting, the governing authority may override the veto and adopt the ordinance by a favorable vote of at least 2/3 of its members. Any discussion? Mr. Dawson.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've had to go through this in the council business, and there's some holes in this paragraph. One, they say the ordinance 10 days after enactment, and that really should be adoption. Also, it doesn't say the fate of anything if the president doesn't sign it. So, we've had to get, really Attorney General's opinions to, what happens if the president doesn't sign. So I would like to see us perhaps give this to the parish attorney and tell him to propose some revisions to this that tells us that are in compliance with state law, that says what happens when the parish president doesn't sign, and also to clarify some of that language.
Okay, we have.
Mr. Martinez, as we've talked about this also, that it's just not clear what happens in here.
I only had one veto in my 4 terms, so, and it was relatively simple. Something.
Okay.
So I don't, it's not used. If it's not used often, it's just hard.
Well, the veto is fairly clear what happens in the veto.
Right.
What's not clear is that if he doesn't sign it in 10 days. Right. And normally you would assume that it would become law, but it doesn't say that in here anywhere.
Well, it does under another section, not on the veto, but it's like a resolution, an ordinance that's
Well,
passed.
it says in the enactment of an ordinance, but we'll have to get to that because I don't think that's all that clear myself either. But in this case, it's, anyway, I'll quit talking.
That would be a good, you making that motion?
Yeah, I'm making that motion.
Okay, motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Dawson and second by Mr. Lambert to send this section regarding presidential veto to the parish attorney for further clarification and a sense of direction, and ask him to report that back to this committee.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor of the motion, please, well, hold up. Let's go with the roll call. Roll call for the record.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Petrie?
Yes.
Mr. Crossclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez? Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, section 7E, section 3-05, participation at governing authority meetings. And we do have commentary from Mr. Pettit and Mr. Quentmore. Mr. Pettit, please come forward.
Section 305, the president shall attend all meetings of the governing authority except for good cause. Currently, our parish president attends the council meetings, mostly, finance, which he's required to, and sometimes drainage, but the most of the standing committees of the parish council, we never see the parish president at. I would ask you all to consider look at a revision to the Home Rule Charter to include the phrase, including all meetings of the governing authority standing committees except for good cause. I think that right now the parish president doesn't think that the committee meetings are meetings of the governing authority, and I would ask you all to consider revising the charter to bring clarity to that. The committees do important work. They come to the council, and it hits the consent agenda for most of the items. And I would like to see the parish president's input at the committee meetings of the parish council. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Quentmore.
I would also like to see some language clarifying. Is if this is done in good faith, that's fine. I mean, he shall attend. So what if he doesn't? So what? And that's okay if that's the intent. But if you need to clarify what all meetings is that planning commission meetings? Is that board of adjustment meetings? What are we talking about here? And if you're going to hold them to a standard, we need better for clarification in this area to dictate that. And shall means attend. That means you're going to. So what if you don't? And if it's in good faith, that's fine. I just think you need better clarification. It's kind of like you say, well, you're going to ratify all your department heads. Well, what if you don't? I do. So this is another segment here that I hope y'all can address. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion from the committee?
I mean, I would, I don't, I mean, this has come up quite a lot in recent past anyway. Or meetings of, or standing committee meetings of the governing authority, is that clarified anywhere?
No.
They're not, okay.
Perfectly
So
clarified.
there's some, we've already established that through legal counsel or whomever else. So are we suggesting that the parish president should be obligated to attend standing committee meetings? I defer to Mr. Martinez.
I'll just say that that's part of the separation of powers supposedly here, that the committee, the council, that's their business to do the committee meetings. I've always either attended or sent somebody there, and that, you know, if the council requested any kind of information. But, you know, to require the parish president to go to every meeting, that would be every night, like the committee meetings. They may be on one committee, but if there's 5 committee meetings in a week, then that plus the regular meeting, plus I mean, that's kind of makes it tough. So I think that that's kind of where the separation of power would come in.
Mr. Lawler.
And I also think, first of all, governing authority, it's defined later on in here what the governing authority is, meetings of the governing authority. But I think, you know, when a parish president has retained a good staff, they send a good staff. We've got a good staff at a lot of our meetings. I know transportation, for one, we go, we can ask for questions. We've got people there many times that can answer the questions. And if not, you know, we can get the information later on. I don't always know that having a parish president at every single meeting would necessarily be beneficial or lead to more getting done at every, you know, recreation, transportation meeting. I think if something's important, I think the parish president should be there. But more importantly, this weighs on the parish president, you know, and if we have a parish president that doesn't want to go to any meetings, so be it. The voters will notice that sort of thing and act accordingly.
Well, by that logic, we should be taking out the requirement that he go to governing authority meetings, by that logic. So I don't, you know, there are meetings where no staff, I can think of multiple committees where no staff at all shows up. Okay, nobody from the administration whatsoever. And, you know, maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, you know, are we, I mean, the question raised by a couple of citizens here were, or what do we expect of the parish president? These are the obligations of the parish president. And if, you know, I'm not that bothered by a parish president not making every committee meeting, because as former President Martin has noted, it's a lot of meetings. But, you know, I would feel much better as a citizen who attends most of these meetings myself or watches all of them, that if somebody from the administration would be at every committee meeting. I mean, we have, you know, this parish is wasted in this standing committees, and the governing authority has wasted a lot of time on a lot of different issues. I'm not going to belabor the point. You know, some of you probably know what I'm thinking about. Okay, but a lot of time has gotten wasted on some very important business in this parish. All right, and we'll get into that later. So, and I think it would not have been wasted if somebody from the administration had been present at these meetings to respond to legitimate questions that certain council members had to ask. Thank you.
Further commentary? What's the will of the committee? Do we have a motion? Mr. Dawson.
Well, I'll make a motion that we leave this as is. I'm going to respect President Martinez when, as he talks about separation of executive and the council.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Dawson, second by Mr. Lawler, to leave this particular section as is. Any opposition? Okay, let's still move forward with the roll call.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. T?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Next, 7F, Section 3-06, prohibitions. We do have, do we have any? Okay, we don't have any comments from the audience. What's the pleasure of well, let me read it. The president shall be a full-time official and shall hold no other elected public nor any compensated appointed parish government office or employment during the term of office for which elected, and shall hold no compensated appointed parish government office or employment until 1 year after expiration of the term for which elected. The president shall not engage in any activity unrelated to parish government business that would interfere with or distract from the performance of such duties as president. Any commentary? Mr. Dawson.
I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can help me here. What are the state ethics laws? Does anybody know what they are? I think it's more than a year.
No, I think it's a year on the state and the parish. I think that's where it came from.
Okay. So this is in compliance with the state ethics law. Okay.
Ms. Castle?
Yes, certainly parish law can be more stringent than state law, as I understand it. So I would like to see this. I think it might behoove us to consider adding a little more time to that clause about the expiration of the term.
What do you have in mind, Ms. Castle?
I don't know. I just think a year is a very short period of time to be out of government, where you have just been involved in all of the decisions that have been made, and then to come back in some capacity. It's just concerning to me. I think it could be a little longer period of time. And I really don't have I have not looked at what other parishes do, but I think it would be wise that we take a look at that.
Mr. Lawler?
If I can just add my thoughts on that and then another issue. I have some concerns about the 1 year. If you looked at it and made it a 4-year term or a 4-year and 1 day, you would be ensuring at least the voters to give them the opportunity to change over the council also. So you wouldn't have the same group of people that maybe this parish president had left, and then they've got a little side deal, hey, in a year we're going to give you this job. You'd have a turnover of council. Just something to look at that we can brainstorm with. The other part of it, obviously we're going to touch on this in conjunction with Section 3-03D with the compensation part of it. But also, once again, we have a shall not engage in activity unrelated to parish business. There's no punitive factor there. It doesn't tell us what's going to happen if a parish president does engage in business that interferes or distracts from his performance or her performance as parish president. I think we have to have, in all of these, we're telling people they can't do something, but there's no stick. And I think we need a stick there. Now, I don't know what the stick should be. That's something that we can certainly discuss more.
Well, I think the stick would have to be something that is within the, pardon me, within the governing authority's power to wield. And you do have some criminal sanctioning power, I believe up to misdemeanor. Are you suggesting, the stick that's the only stick I think you can wield. You've got fining capacity up to, a couple $100, and that's not going to prevent anybody from engaging in any activity. Or is that something that you're considering for a stick, an actual misdemeanor prison?
No, I don't know if a misdemeanor prison, but I think we also have some authority over salary.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's really kind of a brainstorming thing. 'Cause I don't know what's proper. I don't know what other parishes do, but I hate to see a situation where we're telling somebody they shall not do something, but if they do it and they get caught doing it and they continue to do it, what authority do we have to stop them? At that point, we have none. So, it could be if you're doing something, you docked 30 days' pay, one month's pay. That's significant enough to affect behavior, in my opinion, 1 month's pay.
But we are telling the parish here that they shall not hire or appoint anybody. Right?
Correct.
The parish
Well, I see what Coach, I'm sorry, I'm going to call him Coach Fan, Coach
all right.
high school
Fans at
football.
all
but
kind of
that dates both of us, Coach. But I see your point, Coach.
I mean,
because
we're telling the parish that, I mean, he can come work for nothing.
But it's worded that during the term of office, which the elected official, the wording addresses the official himself, not the parish, because the official shall hold no compensated appointed parish government office or employment until 1 year after expiration. So I think I understand your point here, is that the language applies to the recently retired former parish official.
Yes, but we're also telling the parish they can't pay anybody.
So if we try to make that fit within Mr. Lawless' concerns, he's talking about dock and pay. Well,
see, y'all two lawyers, we just so, yeah.
Only one of us is active in the addiction, Coach.
Whatever. I wasn't even going to go there.
Any thoughts, Aaron? I mean, this.
Well, I mean, I kind of disagree with that. I think these two sections in A are really two distinct sections. The two sentences in A are speaking to two distinct situations. The first one being that while the parish is president, you should know they shall not hold any other elected or public office. You know, I think that's kind of separate at this time. And then there's the second part of that sentence, which is saying, so in the first part, they're saying you can't also be, working for the parish in Department of Public Works making $50,000 a year doing something. You can't double up that way. The second part is saying that, after that term, they can no longer, they have to wait at least 1 year before they can get a job with the parish. Then the third part of it, which is a separate sentence there, I think goes back to when the parish president is still in office. Basically, it's a moonlighting provision. They can't go get a job with any other company that interferes or distracts with their performance. Now, the part of the problem is, this parish president is supposed to be a full-time job. The argument could be made as, hey, this parish president is working for Shell as an operator, and he's saying, hey, that doesn't interfere with my business. I'm handling everything I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, they can hold a job with Shell, and they can be the parish president, and they may be able to do a fantastic job. I mean, that's the intent, I think, of this final sentence.
Well, if they can do that, it's not a full-time job.
Well, I agree, and I've never been parish president. I will defer to the one man here that has been. I think it's a full-time job, though, and I'll defer.
Do. I think it's a full-time and a half job.
Exactly.
To be honest with you, but I don't think this ever came up before. I'm not saying it's going to come up in the future, but you get the G section kind of clarifies the deal with the pay from the drainage board. If you want to read it that way, it says the president shall be a full-time and shall hold no other elected official nor compensated appointed parish government office or employment during the term of office, but should any compensated appointed parish government office. The drainage board is not parish government. So I think that's where the language came from on that.
Fine line.
But Tommy, I don't know that.
Tommy, is that a parish check?
No. Well, it's combined because the parish takes care of the drainage board's finances.
I mean,
it's different.
That's a fine line.
It's two different agencies.
Well, I think
we'll get to that later.
Causes some problems as well.
But it needs to be clarified. I agree.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the important thing, to clarify all this. Now, back to Ms. Casso's initial point, are we suggesting that it's appropriate to raise the 1 year prohibition? And let's bring it back full circle and talk about that. I would suggest, I would defer to Ms. Casso, is what I would do.
Well, it's not grounded in any facts that I have found in any research at this point. So it's just a feeling of mine, and I think that it's worthy of some further discussion and certainly some review of other charters and what is done in other areas. But I would not like to see a parish president leave and within a year, or at a year, be back on the payroll of the parish as the infrastructure director. I just I know. I know.
Well, it's been 2 years, so you're good.
You know,
but-
I just, I just think there needs to be more space between,
Well, in maybe in
Those-
keeping with the procedure we seem to have established here, I would go ahead and make a motion and say we would raise that 1 year to 2 years with the understanding that we're going to come back and revisit this thing,
I'd like to
would
see us
second
go to
that.
4.
Okay, motion on the floor. Mr. PT, second
I'm
by
going to
Ms.
go ahead,
Castle.
before I get a second, I'm going to go ahead and raise it to adopt Mr. Dawson's suggestion and raise it from 1 to 4 years.
and I will second that.
From 1 year to 4 year. So that's the language of the motion, to raise that period from 1 year to 4 year. Motion by Mr. PT and second by Ms. Cazzo. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, please execute the roll call vote.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. PT?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez? Yes. Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. Then there's a section B that reads as follows. Nothing in this section shall prohibit the president from serving as an elected member of a political party committee, charter commission, or constitutional convention.
I move we make no changes.
Second that.
I would like to have a little conversation about that, maybe.
Okay.
I think it's a fine line to telling an individual what they can and can't participate in, but when it comes to performing the duties, and right above it says cannot distract from the performance of duties as a president, maybe we should adopt some type of deal to where the parish president has to abide by the same rules of a civil service employee, to where they can't be a part of a political group per se outside of, like, for instance, being a chairman of their PEC or something like that, where they're constantly, I don't know, I'm just for discussion.
So we've got political party committee on here as,
Well, it's saying that.
shall prohibit, I see, yeah,
It says shall not prohibit.
right.
It's like state central committee for either party. You're constantly having conventions and going out of town. So I'd like to see a parish president when they're elected to just, be focused on their job. Again, I think it's a fine line what you're going to tell somebody they can't do in their private time, but just wanted to have some conversation on that.
My concern is that sometimes it's a great honor to serve as a national elector in a presidential election, or to serve on a state committee of some sort, or a political party committee. If you get chosen to serve as an elector for the presidential convention, that's also good for the parish. So, I mean, I think this is good to have a parish president that is involved. As far as the constitutional convention, I mean, I wouldn't have a problem there. I wouldn't have a problem with the charter commission. And I think a political party committee, once again, if the person is not doing his or her job as parish president because of interference with this sort of thing, the voters will see that. And the voters should act accordingly if this person isn't doing his or her job. But I think there are too many good opportunities for any elected official to work within a state or national organization politically, that I just wouldn't want to ban that.
I can go with that. Just
No,
wanted to
I
have
understand.
conversation about it.
Hey, devil's advocate here.
No problem.
Further commentary.
Mr. Lambert?
Mr. Lambert.
I think if this guy is a full-time parish president, he doesn't have time to be doing all this stuff. Now, that's just opinion. Tommy will tell you how big a job, it's a time and a half job. Well, he doesn't have time to be playing around with state and national politics.
Okay, so what's the pleasure of the committee?
Tell me what you thought.
I agree with Van in a way. You really don't have time to participate in all this, but I can understand from Aaron's also from a standpoint as far as the parish and getting that recognition there. It would be good for the parish, but I don't think anybody's ever done it, and I don't think anybody's going to ever do it. But if you want to vote on it and change it, that's fine. But I don't think anybody would have time to do what this says.
I definitely don't think this would be one of those things that we would deem the most important thing to bring to voters.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I have a problem with divesting anybody of any of their political rights, and that's, you know, maybe that's part of why we find ourselves here. And I'm just encouraging to hear Mr. Lawler talk about the voters seeing problems with the parish president and voting him out. That's very refreshing. I'm glad we actually recognize that that's a possibility. As to Mr. Trosclair's discussion about number B, nothing in the section shall prohibit the president from serving on this three things: an elected member of a political party committee, a charter commission, or a constitutional convention. The second one is what we're supposed to be trying to accomplish right now, a charter commission. So I certainly don't have any problem with that. The other two that's inherent in our system. That is that's the participation in the political process. And I don't want to ever discourage anybody, private citizen or elected official, from participating in the process. So I don't know if we had a motion on the floor, but I would move that we leave it as is.
Just discussing.
We had a
We had a motion in a second.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, did not we have a motion?
Yeah, we had a motion and a second.
And a second.
But nobody else does
Yeah.
either.
Okay, the motion, without further discussion, I don't see any. The motion is to leave it as is, and it has been seconded, so we need to vote by way of roll call.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Petey?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
No.
1 nay.
Okay, thank you all. Next, section G, section 307, vacancies. And we will hear from Mr. Pettit. Please come forward.
Uh, 3-07, Section A, the office of President shall become vacant upon death, resignation, removal from office in any manner authorized by law, or forfeiture of office. I'd like y'all to consider adding in a phrase to that paragraph. The phrase would be conviction of a felony for which all appeals have been exhausted. That's not in there right now. And the reason for that, if you look at state law 42:1411, it states two things. Felony conviction which requires removal from public office. You're required to remove them. But then again, it states also conviction of any felony operates to immediately suspend the office holder while recognizing appellate rights of every accused, which will delay removal from office. A little bit of a gray area there. We could put that. Y'all could consider putting that up for discussion. Adding the phrase, conviction of a felony for which all appeals have been exhausted. You don't take away anybody's rights by doing that. Alternatively, you could also consider an amendment by the addition of a new section, say call it 3-09, forfeiture of office. The office of president shall be forfeited if, during the term of office, the office holder, number one, lacks at any time any qualifications for the office prescribed by this charter, or number two, is convicted of a felony pursuant to the laws of the state of Louisiana in any federal law. Just a consideration. I'll enter that into the record too, in the official minutes. I would also ask you all to consider this. In our current charter, the governing authority is required to appoint a person meeting the qualifications for office as an interim in case the parish president is removed from office pursuant to a conviction, and to call for a special election to fill the vacancy if the vacancy occurs more than 1 year prior to the expiration of the term. Nowhere in our current charter does it state a time frame to call for that special election, be it 15 days, 30 days, 45 days. Nowhere in there does it set a time frame to call the special election. I think a time frame at least should be considered, be it 15 days or 30 days, to call for the special election so that we don't have a council-appointed interim parish president that we will have an election scheduled so that the people can vote if need be. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
It says in the charter, and this is all state procedure, that, in a special election called by the council for that purpose, which election shall be held accordingly to the timetable and procedures established by state law. So it costs a lot of money to call a special election, but if there's an election in between at any time, if it's more than a year, then you call that election. If it's 2 months or whatever, you would call that election. So all that procedure is set by state law.
Well, we've actually had a test case here in the parish. I mean, we had 2 councilmen recall from the city of Gonzales, and excuse me, that there are regularly scheduled elections in the spring and the fall. So I agree with President Moore. I don't see that being a big problem, because generally you can have you'll have an election date that's not too far out. I think Mr. Pettit has been reading other municipalities' charters as well, because I came upon I don't know if it was Livingston or St. Tammany, but one of them specifically defined what forfeiture of office means. And there is, I agree that there is some confusion in our charter when it comes to what it means to be removed, what it means to be forfeiture of office, where you have the enumerated death, and what constitutes a vacancy. So I do think that could be cleared up. And having reviewed the applicable state law, there's some confusion between the state, the revised statutes in the election code, and our law as well. One other thing, I'm looking at the suggestions made by that the voters rejected back in 2010, and there was a sentence added to the end of B, and it states the appointee shall be ineligible to be a candidate in the election to fill the vacancy that he/she filled. I would certainly like to re-urge and move to include that in our future discussions.
I'll second that.
Okay. That motion on the floor. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Petey?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you all. And our last section is H, Section 308, President's temporary absence. We don't have anyone from the audience that will be speaking. Let me read. We have 2 sections, A and B, to that. Section A, when the president expects to be absent from the parish for more than 72 consecutive hours, the president shall notify the chairman of the governing authority in writing of the expected duration of the absence. The powers and duties of the office shall be exercised by the chief administrative officer, or in the absence of a chief administrative officer, the president's designee. Section B, if the temporary absence of the president extends to more than 60 consecutive days, the office shall become vacant and shall be filled in accordance with Section 3-07, vacancies. Conversation, discussion, the floor is open. Mr. Dawson and then Mr. Petey.
So we had 2008 would change this 72 hours to 7 days. I'd like to put that back. I think 72 hours is too short a period, but so I'd like to see that 72 consecutive hours to change to 7 consecutive days.
7.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Just a bit of discussion. I
No
see
discussion. We do have a motion and a second, but let's go further
Yeah,
discussion.
not arguing or suggesting that's a bad thing, but we do have 2 committee members, Mr. Dawson and Ms. Casso, who were served on the Charter Commission in 2008, 2009. They did indeed make that recommendation. Both Ms. Casso and Mr. Dawson voted to put that before the voters. They also voted to amend B to increase the president's temporary absence from the 60 days to the 90 days too. I would like to see if the two repeat members could kind of give us a little overview of what their discussions were back in 2010 and why this was nothing too long, but why this is a good idea.
I'm going to be honest with you. I've had a long day, and I don't remember what I did yesterday right now, let alone what I did in 2010 or what my thinking was in 2010. I probably wasn't thinking very clearly because I had not been on this council. But at this point, I agree with Bill that the 7 days, there was ample justification for that. I think at times, I mean, there's communication today that did not exist when this charter was written. People are able to text, they're able to pick up a cell phone. When this charter was written, you still had to go drop a nickel in the payphone. So was it not that long ago? Well, maybe you had that box phone you were carrying.
There you go, the big box.
Okay. So I think that the reasoning, I'm shocked at what I am remembering about those discussions. I think that it was about the ability of the parish president to communicate in the parish, even if he may be out of town on a conference or out of town on vacation. On why we would have considered extending it to more than 60 consecutive days, I have no recollection of that. Bill may be able to help.
Not any better.
Okay. Well, just to, we do have a motion. You want to address that one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The only thing I can see, if somebody gets in an accident or something, is sick in the hospital, and while he was actually doing his duties as parish president, then if he's not in office in 60 days, then he's removed. It may be that you could put in there that, for illness or something to that effect, that if he was injured or hurt or during the performance of his duty, that you could extend that.
And just to clarify, so everybody knows what we're talking about, 3-08 paragraph B currently states if the temporary absence of the president extends to more than 60 consecutive days, the office shall become vacant and shall be filled in accordance with section 3-07. That's B to the 3-8 that we're talking about. So, anybody want to? Should we be thinking about increasing that, or are we good with that? I mean, it's reasonable to me. I think it's good the way it is. 2 months is a long time for the parish president not to be on the job.
I agree.
Seem to be a consensus.
I think this talks about, Tommy, it's being absent, expects to be absent from the parish. He doesn't, so long as he's in St. Elizabeth, he should be all right.
Just don't go to the lake.
Well, it doesn't clarify absence.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what you can add,
Maybe you could do that.
absence of the parish.
Okay, what's the pleasure? We don't want to add to that motion?
Well, do we want to define what constitutes a temporary absence? And is that possible? I don't know, without having thought about it beforehand, I don't know that I would have any suggestions to clarify the regular meaning in the English language.
Outside of illness or being out of the country,
If you're on vacation for 90 days, get him
Making
out.
too much
too much vacation, yeah.
Well, I think all the illness and all that's taken care of in a separate article, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it?
I don't know.
What about circumstances beyond his or her control?
Well, I would say that absence, since it's in this section, is referring to absence from the parish, because in section 8, it talks about absent from the parish. So this is referring to an absence from the parish. If you're injured and you're in the parish, you'll be fine. If your injury is so severe that you're out of the parish that long, well, there may be a good reason you're not coming back. We need to find somebody else. If you're kidnapped, I mean, not much we can do for you.
We're not paying the ransom.
No. I mean, I think this is good as it is. 60 days is a pretty long time.
Okay.
That is a long
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good with it. But I don't want it to be 90. That's, I mean, if we're changing it, I would suggest go down.
60, are we like bartering?
I mean, I trust you on this one, Mr. Lawler. I trust your instincts
Really?
on this one.
Okay.
But there's still a motion on the
Yeah.
72 hours and 7 days, correct?
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. That's the motion that's on the floor. Mr. Lambert?
I have a problem with someone getting hurt in an accident or something at 50, 60 days, and we are going, and he's going to be 75 days, and we replace this guy with somebody brand new who knows nothing. I mean, that's just, I mean, I'm not expecting someone just to, like y'all talking about, take off for 90 days. I mean, he needs to be gone. We should have other actions if that happens, but I mean, I think to protect your parish president, I don't think 3 months is too long for him to have an illness that we try to protect and take care of. This guy who's supposed to be the best person in the parish to take care of our business. I mean, I definitely think the 72 days from what Terry's saying is, 7 days is very realistic. But I think it needs to go to 90 days, but the pleasure of the group.
Well, are we getting back into the comparison of vacancy versus temporary absence? I mean, does the illness mean absence if you happen to be in a hospital in Baton Rouge? I don't know. Does that mean you're temporarily absent?
You're not on the job.
Well, there are some things that could use some clarification, is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So, and are we going to try to clarify or not?
Maybe this is one we need to look at what the neighboring people do. Maybe we can get some ideas from somebody else.
Okay, comment from Ms. Cazzo?
If we're going to look at what other parishes do, even in the last one, I think I had there might have been some discussion about the appointment or in the absence of the chief administrative officer, the parish president's designee. I don't want that falling below ratified members of the administration. So I think we need to clarify that. The parish president's designee doesn't need to be somebody way down the line. It needs to be somebody that the council has ratified. So,
We probably should be the CAO if you look at the
well, it's
charter.
first the CAO, and then if he is not available, it's I've seen the CAO and the parish president both be out of the parish. So who's the parish president's designee? I would just like to add, I would suggest that we find out if there's a third in line to succession.
Well, I can tell you, having looked at, I don't remember, I think it's Livingston again, but the third line of succession would be the council chair in Livingston Parish. So I think you're going to see some other parishes that have addressed this stuff. So,
Problem with that, you can't hold two elective offices at one time.
Separation of powers there.
charter is hard work, reforming that charter, man. Maybe we should have had a commission.
Okay, right now we have a motion and a second to move forward with the substitution of 7 consecutive days as compared to 72 consecutive hours.
I'll take this friendly amendment if Ms. Castle wants to add a ratified position to that next line.
Please.
Must be a ratified position.
And are we going to be looking at the rest of B, the 60 versus 90 as well? We're going to
When
put
we
that on
get
the
to
list?
B, I would think.
Okay. I mean, I'm not married either way, but.
I think that was,
Yeah.
that was intended to be part of it and look at what some of the neighboring parishes do.
Okay, the motion
With a friendly amendment.
with the friendly amendment is addressing Section A.
Correct.
All right. Any opposition to any further discussion? If not, any opposition? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. P.T.?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair?
Yes.
Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr. Lawler?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Section B. Floor is open for further discussion.
I mean, I'll make the motion that we just, I don't know if this takes a motion. I would just like it preserved if indeed we think it needs some investigation. I don't know if that merits a motion, but I would like to have it. I mean, 60's fine with me. I mean, but there was my thinking gets started because I looked at the 2010, the voters were, they had this put before them, where that 60-day temporary absence was suggested to be raised for 90, to 90. Now, I'm not sure what the reasoning behind that. I mean, both Mr. Dawson and Ms. Casso voted to put that before the voters.
I have no idea.
So is that a motion to leave it like it is, but to leave it on the to-do list? Is that your motion?
I'd prefer you make the motion. No, that'll be my motion.
Well, I'll make that motion, that we leave it like it is, in conflict with my previous opinion in 2010.
I will second your motion.
Moved by Ms. Cazzo, second by Mr. P.T. To leave Section B as it is, and we will revisit. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none. Roll call vote.
Mr. Dawson?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. P.T.?
Yes.
Mr. Trosclair? Yes. Mr. Kazare?
Yes.
Ms. Casso?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Lawler? Yes. Mr. Martinez? Yes. Ms. Laurent?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Thank you very much. As before we adjourn, we can go down the list, down the agenda, down the aisle here and the dais. If you have any closing comments before we entertain a motion to adjourn. Let's start with Mr. Lambert. Any comments as we close tonight?
Mr. Quazo, I'm not supposed to go first.
Let's go.
I thought we had a very good meeting, very productive. I think people disagree, and that's fine. We're supposed to sometime, and I think it's going to be good. It's going to be okay.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hernandez.
Just want to make sure that we hear, I know we're going through the home rule charter, letter by letter, but make sure that we hear other forms, so that way everybody's got a voice.
Absolutely. Ms. Laurent.
I think it was a productive meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
I think it was good spirited discussion, and I think that that's what it's all about. And hopefully we don't get too many changes to where, as Van pointed out earlier, that they're either going to vote for all of them or they're going to vote for against all of them. So sometimes that's the way it works. So just got to be careful
Keep that
with it.
in mind. Thank you. Mr. Lawler.
No comment.
Ms. Casso.
I enjoyed the meeting. Thank you very much, and I apologize for my lateness.
It's okay. You were stuck in that Baton Rouge traffic.
Thank you.
Very relatable. Mr. Trosclair.
Enjoyed the conversation as well. I'd just like to piggyback on Mr. Hernandez, and if it takes, I'd like to make a motion for on the 16th and 23rd agendas that we give the opportunity to the two groups, the RPEC and the Better Ascension, to have a 45-minute discussion and bring in their experts with a question and answer following that. On the 16th and 23rd, that would give them the opportunity to get their travel arrangements and all in order. 16th and 23rd.
You want to give a 45-minute, or we had discussed 30?
No less than 30, I would be fine with that. And with the question and answer that last however long from the committee.
Yeah, from the committee.
Sure.
Correct.
We'd also task committee member Casso to vet all experts. Are we we were ignoring the motion that we voted on earlier?
No, I'm not saying that. We can send out at the next meeting, have the experts already notified.
Oh, yeah, you weren't here
to the group.
That's what you get for being late.
I'm sitting here going, how did I get nominated for that job?
And you have to bring snacks to the next meeting.
Maybe I misunderstood the beginning of this, but what we talked about was any experts were going to be the committee's experts, not a group's experts. Groups are supposed to get the same 3 minutes as everybody else. So did I misunderstand something? I thought the committee members would be tasked with finding experts when we had questions, not ABA bringing in its own expert. I've heard their experts, and I have found their expertise in it. Okay, I don't need them. I don't need to hear them again. Okay, I can read their plan. Okay, if I have questions about their plan, I can ask them. Okay, and if I need an expert to answer that question, we've already voted on the procedure for that. We tasked Chairwoman Casso, since she wasn't here, okay, with deciding and vetting CVs and experts, and we'd all get a copy of it. So if we're not going to abide by that motion that we voted on, let's just have a free-for-all. Okay?
Well, I'm going to second that motion by Brandon.
I'm not surprised, and I will object.
I'm not surprised.
Okay, let's go back to dead center. All right, now we're going to come back. Let's come back to you, Mr. PT. But Mr. Burnett, any closing comment?
I really think we're going to move forward in a positive manner when it's all said and done because of the dialogue that we're having and the disagreement that we're having. I think I'm hopeful that we will have a positive end result.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dawson.
So I think I've talked already too much, so I'm done. But thank you to everybody.
Okay.
Sure.
My closing thought.
Mr. Quazo,
Yes.
over here.
Okay.
I told you I need to go last.
Okay,
All right,
here we go.
We're, on April 17th, a group of us are going to cook at St. Jude Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee, where we feed the little children that are sick and their families and parents. So if you have an extra 100 or 200 or 300 or $10, make those checks out to St. Jude Hospital, and I'll collect those at the next meeting if you possibly can. Thank you.
And since we got a
Great,
motion on the floor.
great public announcement. That's a great project.
The sheriff told me last year I was a panhandler.
There you go. Well, let's all be supportive of that and bring forward some contributions. Okay, now, on a serious note, let's go back to Mr. PT's.
Well, do we have a motion on the floor, an objection or not? I mean, you made a motion in there and seconded.
Regarding?
Well, at this point.
Allocating the
we're
16th and the
discussing
23rd.
Closing comments, and then we can go back to recommendations, but then you had said you would take recommendations for agenda items.
Yeah. That's part of my closing.
Okay.
But
Well, is it my turn to close?
go ahead.
We didn't get to, and if we're going strictly by what, in the order that the charter provisions appear in the charter, we're not going to get to other, specifically term limits. And I think right now, while we're talking about the parish presidency, I think now is the appropriate time. While we're talking about the powers and obligations of the parish presidency, it makes sense to talk about if groups are or proposing term limits. And I'll be frank, I'm not a fan of term limits, but other groups have specifically suggested and proposed term limits. So now, while we're discussing the parish presidency, it would seem to me it makes sense to discuss term limits for the parish presidency. So I'll make a substitute motion that we allocate the 16th include term limits for the parish presidency on the agenda of the 16th.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion?
Let's have some clarity.
Can I get a clarification, Mr. PT? Is that term limits for the council and the parish president, or just the parish president?
I mean, we can, I'll either way. I mean, we can do them both at the same time. We can do them differently.
I would like to see them considered together. I think they make sense.
I don't have any objection to that.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion would include term limits, the discussion of term limits for both the council as well as the parish president. Okay. Any opposition to the motion? Any further discussion?
And what does this have in conjunction with the first motion? Is it overriding or in conjunction with it, or where's that?
I objected. As I recall, Mr. Trousclair made a motion, Mr. Lawler seconded, and I objected.
Were you substituting your were you substitute or amended?
Well, I think we're adding.
Yeah, you're amending to add to his, and I seconded that.
Well, however you want to do it, but if we've already voted, okay? No, we voted last week to set the agenda, and the process we were going to have here is to go through this charter, which is the task. The resolution says we're supposed to be going through the charter, not special experts from outside groups. Our first duty is to get through the charter. So if we're going to ignore that council, here's my question: are we just going to ignore the task included in that resolution? Because we were appointed to get through this charter, not ABA.
That's not what the resolution says.
What does the resolution say?
It doesn't say we're going to take this section by section and only look at those sections. It says that we're going to, more or less, it says that we're going to evaluate everything.
Yeah, in the charter.
Overall changes and individual changes.
Okay.
Mr. Kazare has
and
the
we
resolution.
voted last time on President Martinez's motion to take it section by section. Last week, we did that. And that's how we got this agenda tonight.
And we also voted the last time that section by section, among other things, to bring on. So I think it's the proper thing to do. If these organizations want to bring in some experts, to let them properly plan and book their travel arrangements to do so. We're giving them 2 and 3 weeks out.
If that's, and that's what Vice Chairwoman Casso is supposed to be vetting that and collecting CVs and getting the rest of us too. Are we ignoring that vote as well?
Do we got a motion?
Because we voted on that this morning, earlier
didn't
today,
hear
we
that.
voted on that. Are we ignoring that now?
I didn't
not
hear
being
that either.
ignored.
I didn't hear that either. What my recollection of that is that the agenda is up to the chair.
The agenda's always up to the chair.
And between the chair and the vice chair, they decide what's gonna be on the agenda.
Right, and we discussed who's gonna be given, that groups and individuals and elected officials are all gonna be given 3 minutes. Now, Mr. Trosclair's experts already got 45 minutes.
No, we said experts would adhere to a different time, which Mr.
Yeah, and
Mr.
experts
Chairman said
go
30
through
minutes.
or are certified by Vice Chairwoman Casso. I mean, I'm the only one that remembers this?
So we have a motion
Can we
and
get
a
a rereading,
second.
please? I mean, are we just gonna suspend all the rules to kowtow to some special interest group masquerading as a nonprofit? Because
Well,
if that's what we're doing, why didn't the council do their job and put this before the people?
Maybe you should have asked better questions earlier because experts wasn't defined.
Well, let's go back to the tape and let's see what experts were, big man. Because you were wrong.
I'm not going to put up with this
Okay.
while you
Whoa,
get
whoa,
control of him.
Let's not get personal. Come on, guys. Now, we got to be civil about this. We have a task.
you wagging your
we
finger?
have a responsibility to navigate through this process. Now, please, let's not let it get personal. Mr. Martinez, then I'll come back and we'll conclude.
You have a motion on the floor in a second?
There is a motion by
Mr. Trosclair.
Trosclair.
And then an amendment by Mr. P.T.
And a second.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Okay, the substitute motion would
Motion
have to.
to go ahead through the process that we're going through now and finish up with the charter. And then when that's finished, then we'll discuss the ABA.
Second.
Okay, the substitute motion now would suspend any activity with involvement with any other organization. It is to move through the articles, the rest of the articles of the charter. Am I omitting anything? That's what I thought that we got hung up on earlier, that we were going to walk through each item, each article in
That's
the
exactly
charter.
what we decided earlier.
Right, and that's what we did this evening. We started this evening with the first three to discuss and to vet and then choose what we're going to sticky note or put in on our list to revisit, as I appreciate it. Now, it seems as though when we discuss the professional organizations, we did discuss holding them to 30 minutes. Experts. We may need attorneys to come in. We also visited that. So we said, okay, those professionals would be limited to a 30-minute presentation and then enjoined with questions or further discussion with the panel members, with the committee members.
And
as I
Vice
appreciate it.
Chairwoman Casso was going to receive these CVs so we could decide who was an expert and who wasn't. I mean, go back and YouTube it, and you
Mr.
can,
Chairman,
we had this discussion a couple hours ago.
I agree. I agree. We are to go through the charter. That's my understanding.
Yes.
With a caveat that at some point, we're going to hear whoever wants to come up and give us an alternate plan.
Mhm.
So if we go through that, we just need to leave enough time with meetings or whatever once we get through the charter, so that way everybody can hear everybody's thoughts before we make a determination or give the council what they want us to give them. So, well, you say that, but I mean, we went through 3 articles tonight.
3.
Right.
Ms. Calzo.
I really don't have any personal preference one way or the other. However, I think it's much easier if we come back as soon as possible following the discussion of the powers of the parish president, which would probably mean in a meeting fairly soon, very soon, and discuss other forms of government while all of the discussion we have had about the powers of the parish president are fresh in our mind. As we move on to other things, then we will those things will kind of take a back burner. So it would be helpful to me, and perhaps to others, if we went from tonight's meeting to the next meeting, and in the next meeting have the representation of those folks who would like to see something very different, including all of those respective groups, for the sake of having it be fresh in our memories, all of the discussions that took place tonight. That's just a suggestion.
Well, counter to that is there are suggested changes and amendments to not just Article 3. There's a lot of changes to Article 4 and Article 5 administration in ABA's proposal. So what are we going to do? Have them come back next week, and then we're going to go to Article 4, and then we're going to have them come back to address Article 4, and then we're going to go to Article 5, and then we're going to bring them back to address Article 5, which is administration. That, to me, first off, it's not what we were tasked to do. Secondly, it's not what we'd agreed to do both last week and this week by votes of this committee.
Well, I've not studied their proposals sufficiently to know exactly what sections they refer to changes, but if it's after Article 5 that their work is done, then perhaps that's the point.
Well,
it's mostly Article 3 in a Better Ascension's proposal. That's all out there, but I think our job as the committee is to vet the existing charter and outside forms of government to add or amend to this charter to make our parish a better place. That's our job, not just the current charter.
Well, and the fact that you've had plenty of opportunity, I don't want to get too deep into this, but you had 2 committee of the whole meetings, supposed to be a third, to vet their entire proposal. The fact that a council person can come here and say that they are not familiar with a Better Ascension is extraordinarily disturbing to me as a citizen.
May I make a comment, Wayne?
You comment and say whatever you like. That's what we're here for.
I don't know exactly what article they're I can't call to that to mind.
I mean, the proposal's been out there since last July. Since July.
Okay, let me bring this then in. Now, for the record, there are 10 actual sections to the charter. We've covered 3 this evening. We have 7 more to navigate through. The last one is severability, and it's 2 sentences. One sentence, 2 lines. Now, conceptually, this committee will make the recommendations to the parish council. However, in our due diligence, in this process, we want to be open to everybody. We've listened. Mr. Pettit and Mr. Quintmore addressed us 5 or 6 different times this evening in 3 of those articles. But is this not the democratic process, open, free process? And so if attorneys or professionals come, well, we have a window, 30 minutes. 30 minutes to make your presentation. Keep in mind, the living document is not what ABA has or any other organization. The living document is this charter. That's what we will use as our barometer. That's what we will use to make the decision as to what we will or will not recommend. So again, giving professionals or experts 30 minutes, we took an hour this evening before we really started rolling. We took an hour, and I don't know if any of us can claim to have expertise, but sure, I think in good faith, we should extend an opportunity to those individuals. There may be some enlightening moments. Some of it may be educational to us. That may strike a balance and make a difference. I'm not saying that they will. But then the ultimate vote as to what will be sent to the parish council lies within this body of 12. So with that in mind, let's keep an open mind, please.
Everybody's got an open mind.
Okay, but
here's the question. What are we going to be discussing on the 9th?
Okay, that agenda will be decided between me and the Vice Chair, Casso. But as I appreciate it, we want to keep going down to section 4, 5, 6.
Well, that's what I understood too,
Yeah.
but that's not what we've been talking about.
But-
Is that what we're
but-
doing? I got no problem.
Yes.
That's what we agreed to.
To me, that's what we will continue to do.
Okay.
And when those experts come, or those professionals, declared professionals come, then we could have handled our business on the 3 articles within an hour. But we went over that tonight. This is our first really time to immerse. We're just beginning to immerse ourselves. We're going to get better at this process. I mean, we're learning as we're going. I'm learning how to coach between referee between you and Laura. That's pretty cool so far. Be that as it may, I don't know if it's going to do any good, Wade, but be that as it may, let's keep open minds, because everybody's opinion should be respected. And whether we agree or disagree with them, we have that final vote.
And the votes
That
of this
individual
committee should be respected as well.
Oh,
And we have
absolutely.
voted already on this, okay? We've set this procedure, we set the course. That's how we got the agenda we discussed tonight. And the course was, we're getting through this charter, and now we're hearing motions that deviate from that. That's the point I'm trying to make.
I specifically recall that we did listening to an outside source, whomever it may be, and giving them a 30-minute window and also allowing us to have questions.
Sure.
I do recall that.
Right.
Yeah, that was earlier today. When experts submit their CVs to Chairwoman Casso,
Who would like to decline that after the insult
Well,
levied against me, sir? I have no desire to serve in that capacity.
well, the question becomes, and Mr. Lawler can back me up on this, an expert says and does what he is hired to say and do. Okay, who gets to choose the expert? Who gets to certify the expert? I'll appoint me. Let me certify the expert. I'll take on that task, and I'll get their CVs to everybody. So if we're going to let ABA pick and choose the expert, you're going to get a pre-packaged product. Okay, the same pre-packaged product we've been listening to since July, and 2 committees of the whole were convened. That it's not my fault that the committees of the whole comprised of this parish council refused to do their job. That's not my fault.
I got a point of order.
Yes, sir.
So number one, Mr. PT has never been recognized. He just speaks without being recognized by the chair. Secondly, he's way off topic here, Mr. Chair.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and close the business for this evening with the anticipation that we will have a structured meeting. The agenda will be posted, and we will have an open and fair process. Whether we personally or individually agree or disagree with whatever would be said coming from that podium, again, the final decision rests within our hands to make the recommendations to the governing authority. So I don't see nothing criminal about that. I mean, let's just let the process flow, and let's come with the intent of working together in harmony and let the folks express themselves, and then we move forward with decisions at the appropriate time. That being said,
So with that being said, when will these experts be able to come in and show and educate us on alternate forms of government?
we would ask that those organizations would contact, Cinnamon, could we give your number, your contact, your name and contact number?
Yes.
And as they call in, then we can be advised that, that they will be in to speak on a certain Monday, and then put them on the agenda, have it posted, give them their 30 minutes, and then entertain them, let them entertain any questions or receive any questions coming from this dais. Mr. PT.
Is there any standard that we're going to apply to certify an expert? We keep talking around this and nobody wants to answer a very basic, simple question. Okay, what constitutes an expert and in what field? Or are we just going to let any guy who shows up with a CV in hand that isn't vetted by anybody show up and get 30 minutes at the microphone? Is that what we're doing here? Because we'll never get through any of this.
I would think that the organizations that would bring forth an expert would have some kinship to them, some acquaintance with them, they wouldn't put anybody to come before this this committee. So I don't know if we can go into their organization and dictate to them who they should let testify before this committee. I don't know if we could do that.
Well, may I respond?
Sure you can.
Earlier in this meeting, we decided that the groups were going to get 3 minutes to make their pitch, and council members, just like citizens, were getting their 3 minutes, and we had discussed bringing in experts to answer the questions that this committee may or may not have. So now what we're saying is something completely different from that. We're saying that the groups can designate experts that don't have to go to Vice Chair Casso with their CVs. And what are the fields of expertise we're even looking for? We're looking for lawyers? What are we looking for? Parliamentarians? What are we looking for? Former congressmen? What qualifies as an expert? If we can't answer that question.
Well, I think we're playing with semantics.
No, we're not playing with semantics.
I think so. I mean, we're going to agree to disagree, but this committee is empowered with the responsibility and the authority that even if we disagree with any speaker that come before us, guess what? By way of Robert's Rules of Order, any one of us can make a motion and say, I know that this individual doesn't carry expertise. I hereby make a motion that we don't accept testimony from him and her. If you get a second, then it has to go through a majority vote out of the 12 of us. So, again, Robert's Rules of Orders, and guess what? This is good faith.
Well, clarification then. So
Yes,
what
sir.
you're suggesting now is that we're going to have experts appear here on their own dime, on their own nickel, staying at whatever hotel here, and when they get to the podium, we're going to decide if we want to accept him as an expert? Is that what I just understood you to say?
What I'm telling you is that still Robert's Rules of Order will prevail. If for any reason you don't feel that that individual is forthcoming with the truth or not the professional, then you can make a motion. That doesn't mean that everybody else has to go along with your motion, Wade.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I'm thinking practically, from a practical standpoint, if people do go along with my motion, assuming it's me making a motion,
Okay.
and I get the votes that we're declaring that that guy who came from, well, let's just take Columbia County, Georgia, for instance, okay? To say he shows up from Columbia County, Georgia, and we as a committee decide that we do not believe he has the expertise that we're looking for. So we take a vote and he goes home. It makes a lot more sense to me. And I think every parliamentary and legislative body on the face of this planet would certify the expert first and then extend the invitation, as opposed to having willy-nilly and anybody that can draft a CV and use a laser jet printer show up with their CV on the possibility that a majority of this committee is going to certify them as an expert. Nobody does that like that. Does the council operate like that? No, you find experts in the field of expertise that you're interested in, and you extend an offer and pay them thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to come to that podium and deliver their expertise. That's the point I'm making.
But there's nothing prohibiting us from bringing independent or other experts in. Matter of fact, it's budgeted.
Well, we agree then, but that's not what we're talking about now.
To-
Now we're
to-
talking about ABA designating their own expert, not this committee.
To satisfy Mr. PT here, in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, a majority can change any of the agenda items. So if we need to satisfy Mr. PT, we can call for a vote to change the agenda.
If I may, very briefly, just from looking at the, what we have left within the documents, the charter, April 9th, we can do number 4, we can do number 5, April 16th, and I'm talking about the sections. 6th on the 23rd, 7th on the 30th, and we don't have to abide by this. 8, 9, 10, 11 are all very brief, and they're all very short. That can be done May 7th. That leaves us the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th of May to hear experts, to hear from RPAC and ABA, and then to look at everything that we've done and to understand it. And that's a good timetable for us to live on. I think most all of us can agree, we can abide by what we said. Hey, let's move forward piece by piece by piece by piece. And then we can also hear about other forms of government, and we can bring in experts, and other people can bring in experts. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the House and Senate committees continually refer to people as expert and let them speak, and they're not voir dire like they would be in a court of law.
Correct.
So, and that's what we're serving as, is basically a House or a Senate committee. It's the same sort of thing. This is nothing unusual about this. This is done at state and federal levels all the time.
Absolutely. Mr. Martinez.
I'd just like to ask Mr. Dawson, this date that's set in May, I mean, if we needed more time, you would give us more time, wouldn't you?
Well, the council would have to change the resolution, but I mean, if there were good reason, I wouldn't see any reason why the council wouldn't.
Okay, well, that,
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn, and I think it's a unanimous second.
Are we taking a
Thank
roll?
you, thank you.
Taking a roll call?
Do we want a roll call to vote to adjourn? I don't think so. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much for your time and attention.